Hello and welcome to Six Pack. Today I'm going to start a new series. What if Deku became the Iron Fist? Part 1. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and to watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and turn that bell notification on so you never miss an upload. Now wasting no more time, let's begin.
I discovered that the world is unfair when I was just 4 years old. As young Izuku Midoriya sat at the computer table watching the old video of All Might's debut, his great smile lighting up such a dark time in the world's history, he thought, "Sorry kid, it's not happening, you don't have a quirk." It was such a callous way to crush a child's dream. Izuku aspired to be just like him. Surely there must be a way? As his mother stood in the doorway, Izuku turned to face her. His mother, Inko, stepped forward into the light of the computer screen and shed a few tears before speaking as she knelt in front of him. "I can still be a hero, right, Mom?" he asked. With her green eyes fixed on her son's, Inko said, "Yes, Izuku. Yes, you can, but you'll have to work hard, harder than everyone else." "Can you do that, Izuku?" Izuku shook his head violently without hesitation. Looking into his mother's eyes, Izuku exclaimed, "Yes, Mom, I'll work hard, so hard." With newfound energy and optimism. With a nod, Inko wiped the tears from Izuku's face, then wiped her own and got to her feet. Inko took Izuku's hand and escorted him out of the house, saying, "Come with me, Izuku. We're going to visit an old friend of Mommy's." Following a train and taxi ride, they reached a small home dojo. Inko approached the front door and knocked multiple times. After a few moments of waiting, a man in his 40s stepped forward as the door opened. He was wearing a maroon GI with a symbol on the left side of his chest that appeared to be a turtle. He had a striking physique, amber eyes, and black hair. He was carrying a cane with a rough-hewn jade stone on top. Izuku tilted his head, first toward this man and then toward his mom. Inko waved her hand and the man said, "Ah, Midoriya-san, it is good to see you after so long. How have you been?" As Yoshi grinned and waved a parent and child into his house, Inko said, "Yoshi, I told you to stop calling me that. Inko is fine. I'm sorry to trouble you, but I was hoping I could ask a favor of you." He looked at Izuku, who was holding on to his mother's pant leg as they followed Yoshi into a living room where they were immediately given tea. "As you wish, Inko. Now what can I do for you and your son, I presume?" he asked. Izuku spoke after Inko said, "Yes, this is my son Izuku. He's 4 years old, and wants to be a hero when he grows up. Isn't that right, Izuku?" He tried to smile bravely and Yoshi returned the smile, saying, "Why yes sir, I want to be like All Might." Yoshi observed the boy's eyes filled with sadness and remarked, "That is a fine dream, young man. I'll be rooting for you. And what quirk do you have, if I may ask?" Izuku boldly declared, "I don't have a quirk, but I still want to be a hero." Leaning back, Yoshi glanced at Inko to gauge his old friend's desires. Inko looked into Yoshi's eyes and bowed before him. We were hoping you could help with that, Yoshi, after all you're quirkless yourself, but that never stopped you from doing what was right." Izuku glanced at his mother and then mimicked her gesture, saying, "Hamato Yoshi, please help my son achieve his dream." Yoshi looked between the two greenettes and sighed, saying, "Please, Mr. Yoshi, I don't want to give up. I promise I'll work hard, I won't quit." As Izuku raised his head, Yoshi stood up and said, "Izuku, this will be hard work, it'll be painful, and you will get hurt. I'm not a gentle teacher. If we do this, there's no going back. This will take all you have and more. Do you understand?" Izuku fixed his gaze on Yoshi's eyes. "Yes, sensei." Grinning, Yoshi turned to face Inko. Inko looked up, grinned, shook Yoshi's hand, and kissed him on the cheek. "I will do what I can, Inko, but I can't make any promises." After saying, "Thank you, senpai," Inko turned to survey the area. Yoshi rolled his eyes and said, "I never asked how are the boys and Miwa doing." He grabbed his walking stick and slammed it against a table leg, saying, "They should have been back already. They're being teenagers and driving me crazy." His eyes shifted to Izuku, and he growled, "They will feel my disappointment. Starting tomorrow you will come here every day after school and train under me, is that understood?" Izuku gave a quick salute. "Yes, sensei." Inko exclaimed as she and her son walked away, and both adults laughed. Yoshi heard a creak at that moment and hurled his cane, hitting someone in the head. "Ow, Dad." Yoshi moved forward. "If you think that hurt, just wait until you see the training I'll put you through." After 10 years, without even bumping into anyone's shoulder, a boy moves through the crowd like water until he is at the front of the crowd, watching as the incoming hero Kamui Woods is about to capture a giant villain. Wearing a school uniform and red sneakers, the green-haired boy pulled out a notebook with the words, "Hero Analysis for the Future Number 13, printed on the cover. The straps of his bag had 4 different colored wrappings on them, orange and purple on the right and red and blue on the right. Unaware of the boy until he heard the mumbling, an older man with 3 pointed protuberances from his head jumped, wondering when he had arrived. The young boy turned to face the man and grinned broadly as he asked, "What are you, kid, a ninja fanboy?" When he turned around, he saw that Kamui Woods' preemptive binding lacquer chain prison had been interrupted by a new heroine. Believe it or not, you're not far off the mark. Canyon Cannon. Izuku turned away to avoid being blinded by the horde of paparazzi who were photographing the most striking aspect of Mount Lady. As the man who had previously spoken to him started talking, he started making notes about the heroine. Izuku looked up and grinned as he said, "Let me guess, kid, you want to be a hero, don't you?" Before he vanished into the crowd on his way to middle school, he said simply, "I will be a hero." Izuku entered the classroom unnoticed, save for a red-eyed boy with spiky blonde hair. As the instructor entered the room to begin instruction, Izuku sat down. The teacher questioned, "All right, class, this is your last year of middle school. It's time to start thinking about your future professions. Oh, who am I kidding? You all want to be heroes, right?" As the class burst into eccentricities. As Katsuki Bakugo's voice broke through the chaos, Izuku simply kept taking notes. As soon as he said, "Oi teach, don't lump me in with this gutter trash, I'm the only person coming out of this school as a hero," the other students began to react negatively. The outraged responses were replaced by amazement that Katsuki was applying to the nation's most difficult hero school. "That's right, Bakugo, you applied to UA, right?" His laugh was smug. "Yeah, suck it, wimps, I'm going places you plebs could never reach," he said. The teacher, who hadn't noticed Izuku until that very moment, said, "Izuku also applied to UA." She felt bad for exposing the poor boy. The class turned to Izuku right away, not realizing he was there until then. Izuku raised his head from his pen. The class was unsure of how to interpret Izuku. The boy's quirklessness was well known, but he was still able to keep up with the best students. What's even more amazing is that he was able to withstand Katsuki's bullying without ever getting hurt. Perhaps the child had a chance to get in because he was a walking miracle. Ignoring the disbelieving expressions on his fellow students' faces, he said simply, "That's right, sensei." After that, class went on until the last bell rang, at which point Izuku started to gather his belongings before kicking his leg out from under his desk and tripping Bakugo, causing him to explode the floor instead of Izuku's desktop as he got up. Katsuki yelled, "Where do you think you're going, Deku? I have something to say to you," as he stood up angrily, smoking in his palms. Izuku grabbed his bag tightly and glanced over Katsuki's shoulder, saying, "You're making fun of me, right? Thinking a quirkless shit like you could ever get into UA." As he approached the door, Bakugo's thugs blocked it. "Contrary to your belief, Katsuki, not everything everyone does has something to do with you. I'm applying to UA because I want to be a hero, simple as that. You don't factor at all." Izuku let out a sigh as he heard footsteps running behind him, but he quickly ducked aside as Katsuki's hand exploded, filling the room with smoke. Izuku was long gone when the smoke from the open window cleared out of the room and the 3 boys coughed. As if nothing had happened, Katsuki rushed to the window to watch Izuku leave the school grounds. Katsuki yelled, "I'll get you, you fucking nerd." The angry expression on Katsuki's face as he walked off the school grounds made Izuku laugh. As his phone rang to announce a text, Izuku said, "I really wish Katsuki would get his head out of his ass and think about what he says more." He took out the All Might case for his phone. Mikey had sent him a text. "Hey, want to hang out? We're getting pizza." After reading the text and grinning while typing a brief affirmative, Izuku glanced around and made the decision to use this tunnel as a shortcut to the dojo. Izuku said, "I should up my training because I have 10 months left and I'll be at UA." He was unsure of how to go about doing that. He had been training with Yoshi-sensei for the previous 10 years in order to improve his general physical prowess. Martial arts, endurance, and strength training. To put it mildly, his training was already intense. All those years ago, Yoshi-sensei kept his word. As he heard a rumble coming from the manhole cover he had just passed, Izuku remarked, "Maybe I'll finally talk up on his offer of extra training." As he turned, he saw living sludge shoot straight at him and spew up from it. As soon as Izuku reached into his backpack and took out a pair of long, thin, blunt wooden sticks, his training began. He grabbed his backpack and ducked under the tendrils that were rolling to the side. To be sure, they were unremarkable, but that didn't lessen their effectiveness. As the sludge consolidated into one mass, Izuku rose and looked at the armed youth before him. When the sludge said, "You're making this way too hard, kid, but if that's how you want it." A thick tendril of sludge shot in his direction, After eviscerating the slime as it splattered across the surrounding walls with both sticks in his hands at full speed, Izuku hooked his foot into his bag and threw it at the sludge villain, who swatted it aside only to discover his target gone before he was struck in the eye with a powder of some sort. Ah! The sludge villain yelled, shielding his eyes as he started to swing sludge tendrils in a blind rage, slamming them into the tunnel's ceiling and walls while Izuku deftly ducked under them. It's unbelievable that I'm actually defeating someone with a peculiarity. As Izuku inhaled deeply and concentrated solely on the villain before him, he thought to himself. Izuku charged ahead, but as Texas Smash echoed in the tunnel, he noticed the figure behind the villain and ducked to the side, hugging the wall. Izuku broke away from the tunnel wall, instantly plastering the slime villain across the asphalt. As Izuku faced All Might, he recognized that voice from anywhere. As All Might started to collect the unconscious slime into a 2-liter empty soda bottle, he said, "Young man, I must say you handled yourself quite well against that villain. I must apologize for letting him escape, but navigating sewers is quite difficult." Izuku couldn't believe that his hero, All Might, was standing in front of him and expressing regret. All Might said, "I have the perfect apology," as he looked at Izuku's bag on the floor and the notebook with his name on the front. After flipping through the pages in search of some blank space and idly perusing the notes the boy had made about particular heroes, he discovered 2 blank pages, signed them, and gave them back to the boy. All Might handed over the signed journal and stowed the villain away for the police, saying, "There you are, young man." Before Izuku could say anything, All Might said, "Now if you'll excuse me, I'll hand this evildoer over to the police." Izuku looked into All Might's eyes and said, "I don't have a quirk, but I'm still trying to be a hero. Do you think I can?" The top hero gave this boy a wide-eyed stare. Despite his lack of eccentricities, he played a villain and did a fantastic job. All Might examined the boy and bit his lip. Unaware that the captured villain had fallen from his pocket, All Might said, "Your skills are impressive, but there are some things that skill alone can't overcome. I'm sorry, young man." He then leapt into the air, landing on a rooftop, revealing his weakened form. He rubbed his chin and thought, that kid was really skilled, and he could definitely go places. Maybe he could. He reached down to his pocket and discovered that his prisoner was gone. Oh no. Still ranting about Deku's escape, Katsuki Bakugo strolled down a side alley. Bakugo saw a bottle on the floor and kicked it, sending it crashing into the wall and spilling its contents all over the floor. The contents then transformed into a sentient slime creature. "Fucking nerd thinks he's so smart, the next time I see him I'll make sure to blow him inside out," Bakugo exclaimed. Izuku shook his head as he went. As an explosion exploded across the street from him, Izuku clenched his fist and said, "I know he was only saying what he thought was right, but still." He slipped to the front of the crowd and crossed the street, saying, "Oh, what now?" He was shocked by what he discovered. Once more, it was the slime villain. As multiple heroes attempted to bring down the villain, he muttered, "What's he doing free? I thought All Might had him." A few onlookers remarked, "He's got a hostage, and with all these explosions going off nobody can get close." When the sludge villain turned around and revealed that he was attempting to possess Katsuki, Izuku questioned, "Wait, explosions?" Izuku gritted his teeth and hurried toward the villain, past the line of heroes. Izuku was only concerned with the task at hand as he grabbed his 2 sticks and threw them at the villain's eyes, watching as he recoiled from the blows to his eyes and released Katsuki a little as Izuku gripped Katsuki and pulled with all his might. "Stop, kid!" someone yelled, but it was inaudible. The villain screamed, "You again! Damn kid, your luck just ran out," as All Might blocked a giant sludge hand that was about to slam Izuku into the concrete. All Might retaliated against the villain by saying, "We have to stop meeting like this, young man." Detroit Smash. The 2 boys were prevented from flying away by All Might's attack, which blew away all of their sludge. Before the rain started, the crowd gazed at the hole punched into the clouds. The audience cheered, amazing, as All Might released Izuku. Izuku looked behind All Might and saw Death Arms and Kamui Woods approaching him. He followed the pro hero's advice and fled before either hero could stop him, saying, "You might want to get out of here, young man, those heroes don't look too happy with you." Izuku sighed and took out his phone to find a dozen missed calls from his mother and multiple missed texts from the guys. As All Might sped out in front of him like a living freight train, he apologized to his sibling disciples and said, "Yeah, guess I'll have to miss out on the pizza this time." He was then getting ready to call his mother. He yelled, "I am here," and then abruptly shrank into a much weaker, smaller man who was tearing up blood. Izuku reached out and said, "Oh my god, are you okay, sir? Do you need a hospital?" Izuku looked at the man and noticed some similarities, aside from the fact that he appeared to be a walking corpse. Are you All Might?" he asked. Izuku was struggling to make the connection between the powerful symbol of peace and this fragile skeletal figure when he said, "You would be correct, young man. I am indeed the symbol of peace, All Might, and this is my true form." All Might wiped his mouth and Izuku said, How is this possible?" He lifted his white t-shirt to show a gory wound on his side and said, "You see this? I got this about 5 years back, lost my entire stomach and half my respiratory system. I can only do hero work about 3 hours a day now. I rushed off without giving you a proper answer before because I was short on time. By the time I got to the scene of that incident with the sludge villain I was already out of time, and then there you were in the thick of it trying your hardest to help that boy and it moved me to action. You Izuku Midoriya shall take on my quirk and succeed me as the symbol of peace. Do you accept?" All Might asked with a hand out to Izuku. Could this really be happening? Izuku was stunned. The peacemaker giving him his peculiarity. Why him, and how could that have happened? Izuku's mind was buzzing with all of these questions like a stung beehive. After all of my hard work over the years, this is what the blood, tears, and sweat have given me. Izuku firmly grasped All Might's hand. "Yes, I accept." All Might grinned and gave the boy a shoulder clap. Izuku nodded as he released All Might's hand as they parted ways, saying, "No hesitation, I like that. Meet me tomorrow at Dagoba Beach, I'll explain everything and then your training will begin." Izuku returned home to his anxious mother and told her that he just lost track of time while exploring the city and that it was preferable to telling her the whole truth and possibly causing her to faint from shock. Before going to bed, he finished his homework and the remainder of his exercise regimen in his room. Izuku and Hamato-sensei ended the call. Telling him that he would no longer be able to train with him was difficult, but Yoshi, predictably, seemed totally cool with it and even urged him to try his hand at things. After cleaning up after breakfast, he said to himself, "I wish I could tell you the truth, Sensei, but even I don't know what that is." He couldn't wait any longer, even though his mother and the son weren't up yet. He ripped off a sticky note and attached it to the plastic-wrapped plate he had left for his mother, writing a brief note to her explaining his departure for early morning training. After all, his mother always made him breakfast, and even though he didn't have her extraordinary culinary abilities, he wasn't a bad cook, so he had wanted to do something kind for her. Izuku's muscular body was accentuated by his green muscle shirt. He was in excellent shape, with a noticeable six-pack that was molded flush against the shirt's fabric, but no one would call him a bodybuilder. He was wearing his signature red shoes and jeans shorts. Before heading out on a loping jog towards Dagoba Beach, Izuku stretched in the pre-dawn hours and locked the front door behind him. Before the city came to life, Izuku hammered the pavement while sheltered in the quiet of the early morning. He had been running for over an hour when he came across a boy who was most likely a few years his senior. Izuku ran down the sidewalk past the other young person, pretending to ignore him, and rounded the corner, stopping when he was out of sight. Izuku knew a lookout when he saw one. Izuku looked up the side of the building he had rounded, grinned, and started to climb the wall, saying, "I wonder what he's up to." It wasn't easy, but after learning how to scale such surfaces from Hamato-sensei, he soon found himself on the building's roof. He crossed it to gaze down into the alleyway the man had been watching over, and his eyes widened at what he saw. The lead thug remarked, "Look what we have here." He was tall and had hair that oozed down to his shoulders and appeared to be made of slime. He grabbed hold of nothing and asked, "What's a girl like you doing out here?" There wouldn't be any clue that someone was there if it weren't for the outfit floating in midair, and based on the girl's tank top and skinny jeans, it was clear that she was there. As the girl fought against Uza's henchmen, a feminine voice exclaimed, Let me go please." One of them resembled a mind flayer from D&D, while the other had a long, snake-like tail and a forked tongue. As Lizard flicked his tongue out against what he thought was the girl's cheek, Uz laughed at his repulsive comment. "Sorry honey, I can't do that, you see me and the boys have a burning question. When we stick our dicks in you, will we still be able to see them?" He pointed to the button on her jeans and said, "And there's only one way to find out, right?" "No mphh." The girl was about to scream when a tentacle encircled her neck and choked her. Izuku had had enough. He absorbed as much information as he could before jumping off the roof and landing directly on Uza's shoulders. He heard a crunch as his face hit the concrete. Izuku rolled forward off of Uz and punched Squidface in the knee, causing his eyes to widen in shock and fall open. He then got up and struck his chin with his palm, knocking him unconscious by pushing his head back against the wall. Izuku jumped off the wall to avoid the blow that landed in front of the lizard man, who drove his elbow into his stomach, forcing all the air out of him as he dropped to his knees, clutching his stomach as he curled into the fetal position. The lizard hissed and let go of the girl as he spun, whipping his tail towards Izuku. Izuku noticed that the lookout had left and turned back to the alley's entrance. When he turned to face the girl now that there were no reinforcements approaching, he was sucked into a hug that sent shivers down his spine. Even though he couldn't see the girl, Izuku clumsily patted her back, letting him know she was crying from the moisture on his neck. "Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. That was terrifying. I can't imagine what would have happened if you didn't show up. Now, Izuku, what could everyone do?" As he led her out of the alley and into the first rays of dawn, he said, It's all right, there's no need to think about that now. I'm here for you." When the invisible girl eventually pulled away from him and wiped her face clean, he said, "I'm Midoriya Izuku, by the way." She bowed slightly to him and said, "I'm Hagakure, Toru Hagakure. Thank you for helping me, Midoriya." Izuku gestured with his hands. He smiled at her and said, "It's okay, anyone would have done the same, and please call me Izuku. Do you live around here? I'll walk you home. I don't want to leave you alone in case their lookout comes back with more guys," he said while looking at Toru. As she started to lead Izuku back to her house, she stopped in front of her house gate and said, Okay. Call me Toru then, Izuku, and yes, I don't live far. Once again, thank you so much." Izuku grinned and was about to reassure her that it wouldn't be a problem when he felt Toru rush into her house and kiss him on the cheek. Izuku touched his cheek for a moment before recalling why he had left this morning in the first place. He yelled, "Oh man, I'm going to be late," as he started to head for Dagoba Beach. Even though All Might had instructed that they meet in the morning, which was still the case, Izuku felt as though he had let him down when he arrived well after sunrise. As he sat on top of an old refrigerator in his muscular form wearing a long-sleeved white t-shirt and cargo pants, Izuku repeatedly bowed to his idol, who only laughed. "I'm sorry, All Might. I'm late, I know, please forgive me," he said. "You're earnest, I like that, but don't sweat the small stuff, young Midoriya. I asked you to come here in the morning and by my clock it's still morning. Now let's get down to brass tacks. I told you yesterday that I would explain everything to you before we start so you're not going in blind." Izuku nodded as he sat down on an outdated space heater. Before starting his story about One for All and All for One, All Might coughed. Long ago, when quirks were still fairly new, there was a man who took advantage of the chaos of the time to build an army to do his bidding. That man's name was All for One, and he had the power to take quirks for himself or give them to others. He used his power and charisma to draw people to his side. The only one he couldn't convince was his younger brother, who was sickly but had a strong moral compass. All for One forced a quirk on his brother, whether as leverage or out of true concern for his brother I'm not sure. This quirk gave his brother the ability to stockpile power, but unknown to either, the younger brother did possess a quirk of his own, the power to give his quirk to others. These two quirks combined into the quirk I now have and the one you will soon inherit, One for All. And so you see, young man, this power created by evil and passed down from person to do good and one day rid the world of all for one once and for all. That is what One for All is, and it's the power I'll be passing on to you as the ninth holder, but before that we need to get your body ready for it, and that's why we're here." Learning that this ultimate evil had the ability to take quirks and that he would eventually have to battle him left Izuku somewhat stunned. After swallowing, he acknowledged All Might's words. "Get my body ready, what do you mean, and what does that have to do with this place?" he inquired. All Might nodded, observing that Izuku's ability to adjust so easily to the current situation was a positive indication that he could cope with such absurd situations. Izuku wrapped his arms around himself at the prospect of losing his limbs to such a power. "Yes, you see, One for All has been passed down through 7 other people besides the original owner, each of them adding power to it, making it stronger and stronger, and all that power will be housed in you, so if you're not ready for it, it will kill you or at the very least blow your limbs off." Taking a deep breath, he asked, "It's that strong, hun?" Izuku stood up and prepared to take action, saying, "Well, I'm ready, All Might, to do whatever it takes to make this power mine." "Good to hear, young man. For the next 10 months I'll train you in preparation for the UA entrance exams. From what I saw in the tunnels, you already have some training under your belt, so this won't be as arduous, but we'll see. Now I'll write up a training regimen for you, but the first step is for you to clear this portion of the beach of all this garbage." He was waving around the immediate vicinity. Izuku already considered the best way to move each piece after glancing at all the big appliances and the like. Izuku leapt into action, snatching up the space heater he had been sitting on and dragging it off. "Remember, this is a marathon, not a sprint, so take your time and pace yourself. Now enough talk, let's begin," he said. He continued doing this until dusk, at which point All Might let him leave training and gave him multiple sheets of paper that included information on his training schedule, including when he should go to bed. Izuku not only achieved All Might's objective, but he also went above and beyond by cleaning the entire beach in half the time he had allotted the boy. Izuku was practicing his martial arts stances when All Might walked down to the fully cleared beach and saw him until he saw All Might approaching him in his true form, dressed in jeans and a deep blue jacket with a scarf. Izuku's eyes glowed with delight at his idol's admiration. "Young man, you are truly surprising. You cleared the entire beach in record timing. I knew you'd probably complete it in less than 10 months, but 5, way beyond my expectations." Izuku grinned broadly. Izuku responded, extending his arms and legs before coughing on the steam of All Might's metamorphosis. "Thank you so much, All Might." All Might looked at Izuku, who took one of his silky blonde hairs and held it out to him. "Now that you've come this far, I believe you are ready to receive my power. Now, eat this," they said. Before he spoke, the teenager repeatedly glanced at the hair and then back at All Might with his green eyes. With a doubtful expression, he said, "You want me to eat your hair?" All Might nodded. Izuku took the hair from All Might's fingers and, after tying it into a tight ball, swallowed it with a heavy shudder. "Yes, for you to have my power you need to take in my DNA." As All Might assumed a fighting stance, Izuku questioned, "Now what?" Before delivering a blow that Izuku narrowly avoided, he said, "Now you survive until the power comes to you." The air from the blow kicked up a sizable swath of sand. Izuku smiled after landing to All Might's left. "Yes, sir," he exclaimed as All Might materialized before him in an instant and delivered a gut punch that Izuku deflected with both arms, feeling as though his bones would shatter under the force of the blow. Izuku was sent sprawling backwards and then narrowly escaped another blow by rolling to the side due to the sand that All Might's attack had kicked up, which gave him some distance from the pro-hero as he moved stealthily through the sand shroud before it settled. "I must attack. I cannot remain on defense, stealing." Himself, Izuku ran forward at All Might's back, sliding between the hero's legs as he turned around to face the attack, and once behind All Might he jumped to his feet and spun on his heel, driving a kick into All Might's right side, and that's when he felt it, the power sparking to life within him and flowing outwards as he connected with All Might's side, sliding the hero across the beach before Izuku fell to the ground, clutching his leg as pain radiated through his body. "Ah!" Looking at his broken and bruised leg, he screamed, "What happened? I thought you said I was ready." He looked at All Might in bewilderment and spoke harshly through clenched teeth. "I believe he broke a rib with that kick." All Might shrank to his smaller form, clutching his side. "It seems I was too optimistic, young Midoriya. Although you are not yet ready for 100%, you can dial it back to a more manageable level now that you have experienced what it's like to fire at all cylinders. This will be the main focus of the next 5 months." All Might thought to himself, "I think I just created a monster," as he and Izuku got into a taxi to go to the hospital. "Right now, I think it's best we get that leg of yours looked at." After 5 months wearing his sleeveless forest green GI and pants with the symbol of his dojo on his back and left side of his chest, Izuku took a deep breath as he entered the UA campus. "This is it. All that training has led up to this moment, time to make it count," he said, while an irate shout echoed behind him. "Deku, you have incredible talent. Get moving." Izuku retreated to prevent contact with the eruptive teenager, but Katsuki yelled as he pushed past him. As he entered the school, he shook his head and said, "And a good morning to you too, Katsuki." He saw a cute brown-haired girl walking nearby, who appeared to be writing something on her palm and eating it. He smiled, thinking, I should give her some calming techniques before the exams to help her focus. Before he lost her in the crowd, he thought, and he took a seat in the auditorium after receiving his entrance card. He had just sat down when he felt someone squeezing him tightly around the neck, and he looked down to see a set of floating clothes hugging him. Shocked to see, or rather, not see, Toru here, he said. As the room grew darker and Present Mike took the stage, she took the seat next to him and remarked, "Fancy meeting you here, Izuku. I didn't know you were planning on going to UA too, what a coincidence." Izuku muttered, "Yeah, I had no idea you were planning on studying to be a hero, small world." Toru reached out, took his card from his loose fingertips, examined it, and then sighed. She handed him his card back and said, "We're not in the same area, that sucks. I really wanted to see you, I mean see your quirk in action. I didn't get a chance to see it when we met and you obviously know what mine is." Izuku laughed pityingly. "I guess I'm sorry." As Present Mike continued to explain the entrance exam, he rubbed the back of his head. "There will be 3 villains that I acquired. Each one is worth 1, 2, or 3 points, respectively. The goal of the exercise is to simply eliminate as many villains as you can in order to maximize your score. Destroy them however you see fit, but don't interfere with the other competitor, so don't use anti-hero rhetoric. If you get the idea, then say, yeah. Present Mike's excitement caused the auditorium to go silent as a grave. Please excuse me, sir. This pamphlet contains 4 villains. If this is a mistake, UA should be ashamed of itself. You two should go somewhere else to flirt. Some of us are serious about attending this prestigious academy and becoming heroes. Izuku raised an eyebrow at this man, who was undoubtedly a stickler, and Toru was making faces at the idiot with the glasses without either of them realizing it. Nice catch there, that 4th villain is more of an obstacle. Think of him like a natural disaster, something best avoided if at all possible, said Present Mike, clearing his throat to attract the attention of all the incoming students. Now, if there are no more questions, go to your designated battlegrounds. Try your hardest, plus ultra. They all scattered to their battlegrounds. Izuku stood in front of a huge gate, surveying the other applicants without recognizing anyone but the girl he had seen in the crowd earlier, who appeared even more anxious than before and might benefit from a few breathing exercises to help her center and relax. However, just as he was about to move forward, a heavy hand landed on his shoulder. So, by interfering with her warm-up, are you going to ruin her from the beginning? Izuku turned to face the man who had summoned him and Toru to the gathering. Do you always make snap judgments about people you've just met? As the gates to the training field opened, he asked, swiping the boy's big palm off his shoulder. Go, 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 there are no countdowns in combat. Present Mike shouted as Izuku charged into the battleground, leaping up onto one of the buildings, assessing the terrain and all of the adversaries in the area, and creating an attack strategy as a green light shot forward from the center of the crowd, leaving the others in its wake. Izuku snatched the glass shards out of the air as he ran forward and threw the shards, impaling 3 robots as he passed them before they exploded. The other applicants watched in shock at how quickly Izuku racked up points before they too joined in the fray, desperately trying to catch up. Alright, one for all, let's do this, he said, closing his eyes and letting one for all flow through his body, green lightning arcing around and cloaking his body. One for all, full cowl, he said, stepping off the edge and running down the side of the building before dive-bombing onto one robot, causing an explosion that shattered the windows surrounding him. All Might stood in the rear of a monitoring room, watching Izuku test his training, and he couldn't take his eyes off of him until he felt a blow to his shin. Ow, ow, ow. Why, recovery girl. He grabbed his shin and hopped on one leg while shouting. Have you forgotten how many times I had to come and patch you two up, or have you erased that smile from your face? The old woman wearing an eye shield and a doctor's coat sighed. There's no need to worry now, even though I apologized for how out of control we both got back then. As the principal released the boss of this game, All Might turned back to the screen and remarked, he knows his limits. Before the ground started to rumble and a huge shadow swept over him, Izuku punched through a robot that was jumping back from the explosion and sliced through the neck of another robot as he landed, watching it fall backwards and erupt in smoke. He was covered in a light sheen of sweat and did some quick math, saying, I should be at 97, just 3 more and I'll have an even 100. When he looked up, he saw the natural disaster they were supposed to avoid. Natural disaster, that's more like a cataclysmic event. He shouted, shocked at the size of it. He was about to get out of the way of this thing before he heard a scream and looked down to see that brown-haired girl from earlier. She seemed to be trapped under some debris caused by the appearance of the zero-pointer. I can't run, he said, turning to face the giant robot, and felt his face break into the widest smile ever. She, well, let's see if I can stop a natural disaster with a punch. Izuku took a deep breath and, just as he was eye level with the bot, he went to scream out. Smash. Something in the back of his mind shouted as well. Izuku reared back, feeling One for All gather in his arm. Pistol smash. Izuku thought he would feel more fear or anxiety, but instead he experienced only excitement. He crouched down, channeling his full cowl into his legs, then leapt upward, cracking the roof he had been standing on as he rocketed upwards towards the robot's face. Before realizing what was happening and trying to find a way to slow his descent, Izuku started to fall, laughing, and drove his fist into the robot's face, caving it in as explosions erupted from various parts of the robot's body. He was slapped across the face just before he hit the ground, which instantly stopped his fall in midair. He was then dropped to the ground and saw the cute brown-haired girl smile at him before throwing up on the pavement. Thanks for that. For some reason I thought I'd be fine hitting the pavement until I realized I wouldn't be, he said as she gave him the thumbs up and continued to empty her guts. Izuku got up, looking at his arm and hand, noticing some light bruising and knowing that at least one bone in his arm was broken. Damn, went beyond my limit, he said as the recovery girl approached him, passing candy, and then slapped his shin with her cane, causing him to yelp. You know your limits, don't you? She sighed before tending to his arm and bringing the girl along to help her feel better. After leaving the arena with the other applicants, Izuku went home after hearing from the faculty that it would take a week or so to find out if he passed the entrance exam. As he was leaving the school, someone jumped on his back, and he looked up to see the sky, knowing it was Hagakure. How'd you do, Izuku? She hopped off his back and walked next to him before asking. As Toru stared at him in shock, he sighed and rubbed the back of his neck. I had 97 points, but then I took out that big robot that we were all supposed to avoid, so I don't know if that'll count against me for not following directions. She had run like crazy until time ran out with one of those big guys in her area too, but he'd gone and destroyed it. That was crazy. Izuku, you're incredible, excited, she said. That's my number. You call me right after you get your acceptance letter, understand? The very second after you read it. She then took his hand, took a pen out of her purse, and wrote a number across his palm before hurriedly leaving. Izuku glanced at his hand and then at Toru's retreating figure before saying, okay. The following week was the longest of his life, full of workouts and frequent mailbox checks. He had called Hamato-sensei to let him know how the exam went, and the guys told him that they would throw him a party once he was accepted, which made him smile. He had also been texting Toru, or rather, he was inundated with Toru's machine gun texts, as if she had stolen it from the person pursuing him. Izuku took a deep breath before tearing open the envelope, which revealed a small disc that started playing a hologram of All Might in his buff form and a yellow pinstriped suit. Izuku, it's here, why your AC acceptance letter, she said, holding out the envelope to him. He looked at it like a vicious animal ready to rip his throat out before he grabbed it and fled to his room. Salutations, young Midoriya. I apologize for not getting back to you over the past week. The screen changed from All Might to a picture of the girl he had saved, speaking to present Mike. I heard him say he only needed 3 points to pass and yet he gave that up to save me, she said. Now I know you're on pins and needles and I'll answer your question right after you see this. Can you give him some of my points? I have to repay him in some way. Before present Mike placed his hand on her head, she clenched her eyes against her tears and said, it's unfair that he was so close and lost it because of me. In front of Izuku's passing score, the screen returned to All Might grinning as usual, saying, don't worry about him, he's doing just fine with the points he has, there's no need to give him yours. How could someone who performed such a heroic deed be rejected by a school of heroism? The screen abruptly cut off as Izuku stood in his darkened room, tears streaming down his face. He turned and opened the door to find his mother pacing in front of it, and he gave her a tight hug. You Midoriya have made it, welcome to Ua Your Hero Academia. I made it, Mom. I did it. As the two sobbed joyfully into each other's arms, he said, squeezing her tightly. Izuku turned around as he left Hamato Dojo and bowed to his sensei and his siblings, who were his disciples. He didn't know where he'd be without Yoshi, Leo, Raph, Donnie, Mikey, and Miwa. They were all like family to him. In contrast to their father, Master Splinter's sons did have peculiarities. It seems that the 4 of them were quadruplets, whom he had adopted while he was in America, and they all shared the trait of being anthropomorphic turtles, or kappa. His wife, who died soon after giving birth to Miwa, was his biological daughter. She also had a peculiarity. Miwa was humanoid from the waist up, with scales on her arms and even a forked tongue, vertical pupils, and fangs, but from the waist down, she had a white snake body. Splinter grinned and patted Izuku's shoulder, saying, thank you so much Hamato-sensei for everything. I'll try to come by on the weekends to continue my training and see you guys. Izuku was given a medallion with the Hamato symbol on it, which resembled a turtle with 4 circles on its shell. Splinter smiled and said, it was my pleasure to train you Izuku, you're like one of my own and I look forward to the things you will accomplish in the future. He put it around Izuku's neck and said, I gave each of my children one of these when they graduated and now I give this to you. He then moved aside to let his sons and daughter bid Izuku farewell. Leonardo approached and gave Izuku a little book. Being the oldest means being a leader, and it's the same for being a hero. The whole country looks up to the #1 hero, so I figured this book might help. It got me through some of our rougher ordeals, hopefully it will do the same for you. Izuku began to read the title of the book. Perfection, the Pointless Pursuit. Nobody is perfect, you will make mistakes, and I hope this will help you learn from them and keep pushing forward. Leo said, bowing slightly to Izuku as he did the same thing. Yeah, move it. Raphael handed Izuku a fresh pair of Eskrima sticks while pushing Leo aside. Before slugging Izuku in the arm, Raph remarked, These should be able to handle the new strength of yours, and Donnie may have touched them out a bit. When Donatello stepped forward and shook his head, he said, "Knock 'em dead, kid," and turned to leave. He held out a briefcase and then threw a thick book on it, saying, "Sorry about our resident brute anyway. I talked with your mother about your hero costume and well, I hope you like it." Donnie punctuated each of the final 4 words with a slap to the book. "And this is the instruction manual, everything you need to know about the suit, read it, memorize it. This is your Bible." Mikey smiled and pulled out a box, saying, "I think he gets it, Donnie." He vaulted between the two. As Izuku gazed at the collectible, his eyes almost exploded out of his skull. "This, my friend, is the limited edition SDCC exclusive box set of us when we were heroes in America, bro," he exclaimed. Izuku attempted to return it, but Mikey ignored him. "Mikey, I can't accept this, it's worth over $500, Izuku said. He smiled and placed both hands on Izuku's shoulder, saying, "Don't worry, little bro. We all got one, but the bros just gave them to me so I have spares." Before he started crying, he said, "I the Holy Chalupa bless your endeavor, my brother." Even though his sobs could still be heard outside, he yelled, "I promised myself I wouldn't cry," before dropping a smoke bomb and vanishing. Miwa let out a sigh. She handed him a white snake ring and said, "He's so dramatic, here you go." Izuku grinned to himself and started crying as he slid the ring on and glanced at the 5 of them. She said simply, "For luck," and then slithered off. He said, "Thank you so much." He bowed one last time before heading out, packing Donnie's instruction manual, Raph's and Mikey's gifts in his bag, and hefting his case and gym bag. Before going home, he needed to go somewhere else. He wanted to honor everyone who supported and encouraged him as UA got underway tomorrow. He traveled to Dagoba Beach, where he witnessed all of the power in his diminutive form. All Might had agreed when he called the hero last night to meet this morning. Izuku approached All Might and placed the gym bag and briefcase down. Izuku bowed and said, "Thank you for meeting with me, All Might. I know you must be busy." All Might waved it away. As the young boy shook his head, All Might put a hand on Izuku's shoulder and said, "You are my pupil and successor, Izuku. If I have time, you are always my priority. Now I think I know why you called me here and there. There is no reason to worry, young Midoriya. I had nothing to do with you getting into UA. You did it on your merits and yours alone, so there's no reason to doubt yourself." "Oh no, All Might, I would never assume you would break the rules for me. The reason I called you here was to thank you properly. I always wanted to be a hero and I strove for it, pushing myself in my training, but I always knew that there was a greater chance of me not getting in without a quirk. Nobody thought I could do it except my sensei and my mother, but then you came along. The symbol of peace, and you gave me your quirk. I'm so thankful, and I want you to know I will do whatever it takes to make it to the top. I won't give up." Izuku screamed and raised his fist, widening his smile. With his blue t-shirt snugly fitting his muscular body, All Might assumed his buff form. As the morning sun shone on them both, All Might threw his fist into the air and said, "Ha ha ha, that's what I want to hear, young Midoriya, go forth and show the world that you are here." He also stirred the sand from the beach. Izuku bid All Might farewell before leaving for home, where his mother was waiting for him. As her son entered, kicking off his shoes, she embraced him and said, "Welcome home, Izuku. Did you have fun with Splinter and his family?" He grinned and gave his mother a hug, lifting her off her feet and somewhat shocking her. "I'm home, Mom, and yeah, the guys sent me off with a bang." As he put her down, she slapped his back playfully and said, "Izuku, put me down, stop showing off." Izuku looked at his mother, who was crying rapidly, and he hugged her. "I just wanted to say thank you, Mom. You believed in me when no one else did, and you did everything to help me on my dream no matter what. Introducing me to Master Hamato, helping me stick to my diet my UA instructor gave me. You've always been there for me, and I want you to know I appreciate it so much, and I love you. You don't have to thank me, Izuku, it's my job. No matter what you do, I will always believe in you." As he stood outside the Class 1A door, Izuku opened his eyes and inhaled deeply before exhaling. "This marks the beginning of my path to hero status. I simply need to keep in mind the people who trusted me no matter what." As he opened the door and entered on a dispute, he had visions of All Might, his mother, and Hamato and his family. The glasses guy who called out him and Toru during the exam ceremony made snap judgments about what he had planned for the brown-haired girl he saw in the back of the classroom. When their eyes met, her face flushed and she turned away from him. "You there, get your feet off that desk right now. You are disrespecting the history this desk has seen and all the future students who will inhabit it." Katsuki Bakugo, his winning personality, yelled at full force this morning, "Get off my ass and get the stick out of yours 4 eyes." There won't be any future students after me because once I become the top hero they won't need anybody else. Izuku considered stepping in, but then he felt someone coming toward him. He turned and threw his arms out, catching Toru. He then spun around with her in his arms while she giggled, and he sat her down on her feet beside him. Toru laughed, relieved that no one could see her blushing like a stop sign because she was invisible. "Izuku, you caught me," she exclaimed. Before a pair of black eyes filled his field of vision, he said, "Sorry Toru, you caught me off guard." Izuku stepped back to see who was speaking. "Toru, Izuku first name basis already. You move fast stud. No wonder you were the top scorer in the entrance exam." It was a girl with pink skin, yellow eyes, black sclera, and frizzy pink hair and horns. She eyed him like a lioness and said, "Ooh, you're already checking me out. Slow down, buddy. You don't even know my name. It's Mina Ishido by the way Izuku." Katsuki then interrupted. "Deku the top scorer, that's a load of horse shit," exclaimed Katsuki as he hurried to confront Deku. Before a voice could be heard at the doorway, Katsuki yelled, "What's this shit about you taking out a 0-pointer, Deku? What did you do, bribe the judges, blackmail some of these guys with those creepy notebooks of yours?" They all turned around to see a sentient sleeping bag speaking to them. "It's too early for this nonsense, sit down and be quiet, class is in session." As everyone sat down, the man or sleeping bag inside stood up and unzipped it. He took a stopwatch out of his pocket and pressed the button. "My name is Aizawa Shota, I'm your homeroom teacher. In the time it took you to quiet down, hundreds of lives could have been lost if this were a hero situation. You all have no discipline, but I'm going to change that. We're going to have a quirk assessment test and the bottom scorer will be expelled." All of the students erupted as the glasses-wearing boy got to his feet. Their teacher smiled manically, a sadistic light shining in his eyes as he said, "That is completely unreasonable. You can't just expel us as you please." A chill ran through the students as he said, "Guess we'll see about that, won't we?" As the boys and girls separated to their separate dressing rooms, he said, "Put your gym clothes on and meet me out on the sports field, and be quick about it." He left the door open. When someone spoke to Izuku, he started putting on his gym pants while wearing the medallion that Master Splinter had given him and Miwa's ring hanging down against his bare chest. The boy was blonde and had a big tail with a tuft of blonde hair at the end. He pointed to Izuku's medallion and asked, "You're a student of Hamato Yoshi, correct?" Then, "I saw your medallion and thought I'd ask." "Yes, I'm Izuku Midoriya. Do you know Master Hamato?" Izuku said, concealing his necklace with his gym shirt. As the two shook hands, he smiled warmly and said, "I know of Master Hamato from my own master. He praises Master Hamato as a warrior and skilled teacher. I'm Mashirao Ojiro, nice to meet you, Midoriya." Performing a perfect 90-degree bow, the boy with glasses said, "And I am Tenya Iida. We took the entrance exam together, and I want to say I am sorry for my behavior. Obviously you had no ill intentions for that girl and saw through to the deeper meaning of the exam. I am truly sorry for my behavior." Izuku gave a headshake. As they left the locker room and gathered on the sports field, he patted Iida's shoulder and said, "Forget it, we were all on edge, and I can't be mad at you for trying to look out for someone else, just, give people a little more faith." He looked at Midoriya and tossed the ball to him after saying, "All right, now that you're all here, we're going to do a series of physical tests in which you will use your quirks to get the best score possible." He pointed to the circle on the ground and said, "You go first, throw this ball as hard as you can. I'll measure its distance with this. Do whatever you need to as long as you don't leave the circle." Izuku stepped into the circle and inhaled deeply before green energy erupted all around him. He positioned himself like a pitcher and threw the ball as hard as he could. Before turning his device to reveal that Izuku had thrown the ball 750 meters, Aizawa glanced at the readout screen. As Izuku returned to his standing position, the other students' eyes widened. As Toru squeezed his arm against her chest and squeezed Izuku's arm between her breasts, the other students blushed and one short boy with purple spheres for hair bit his lip in jealous rage. "Nice one, Izuku," Toru exclaimed. As he threw another ball to Katsuki, Aizawa said, breaking the humor of the moment, "Next is you." Glaring at Izuku, he took a step forward and threw the ball with a loud explosion. Die! The ball shot skyward and disappeared from view. Aizawa displayed Bakugo's score, which indicated that he had only thrown the ball 705 meters. He glared at Deku, his palms smoking as he growled. As the test proceeded with the remaining 18 students, he exclaimed, "This doesn't mean shit, Deku, I'll beat your ass in everything else." Everyone was shocked when the girl Izuku had saved during the entrance exam turned out to be Ochako Uraraka, who scored infinity, surpassing all previous scores before going on to the next test, a 50-meter dash. Before Izuku and Katsuki stood at the starting line of the 50-meter dash, everyone appeared to have adapted to the pressure of the test and the intensity of the situation. The tension between Izuku and Katsuki seemed to ratchet up through the roof, making the air heavy, until the starting signal blared, releasing all of the tension and allowing the two to move forward. Izuku pushed off the ground, leaving his shoe indentions in the ground, and shot forward like a green bolt, while Katsuki shot forward like a horizontal rocket. The purple-haired boy was almost blown away as the two of them launched themselves into the student crowd, but it ended as swiftly as it had begun, with Katsuki crossing the finish line with a time of 4.13 and Izuku right behind him with a time of 4.14. As Izuku watched him leave, Katsuki yelled, "What did I tell you, Deku? I'm going to crush you in every test." As he considered, he shook his head. Activating full cowl takes too long, so I need to improve my reaction time when facing Bakugo or an opponent with the same level of speed. As they observed the two boys in wonder, the others seemed to be more concerned with their differences than with the quirk assessment. Everyone appeared to be influenced by their mindset, which caused them to exert more effort. As the next two competitors took the starting line, Ochako Uraraka declared, "The fated battle of rivals starts here." Tenya Iida ultimately won with a time of 3.04 seconds. Bakugo and Midoriya appeared to compete with each other in the remaining tests rather than merely attempting to pass them. Izuku scored the highest in the grip test with an even 600 kilograms of force, followed by Mezzo Shoji with 540 kg. Even though Izuku landed farther than Katsuki, they ended up tying as both players cleared the sandbox. Katsuki was furious about the crushing loss and vowed to defeat him in the next test. Due to the purple dwarf's destruction of the record for repeated side jumps, neither was able to establish a foothold in the subsequent test. The two were certain that they would both be far from the bottom, so they did not care about the 3 tests that were left. He pressed a button on a remote control that displayed a hologram with all 20 test results. "All right, testing is done, and since it would be irrational to call out your scores one at a time, I'll put them all up here." When Izuku saw that he was among the top 5, he grinned. Momo Yaoyorozu, Izuku Midoriya, Shoto Todoroki, Katsuki Bakugo, Tenya Iida, Fumikage Tokiyami, Mezzo Shoji, Mashirao Ojiro, Ajiro Kirishima, Mina Ishido, Ochako Uraraka, Koji Koda, Rikido Sato, Suyu Asui, Yuga Aoyama, Honta Siro, Denki Kaminari, Kyoka Jiro, Toru Hagakure, and Minoru Mineta were the last to receive the scores. As Toru held Izuku, the poor boy's soul tried to escape his body, shocked by the way Shell looked at him. "Izuku," she exclaimed, sobbing joyfully against his chest, "I was so close to being eliminated." He patted her head awkwardly and said, It's okay Toru, you passed in the end, that's all that matters." The girls all gave a collective, "Ah," and some of the guys glared at him, blushing at their affection for one another. Mina exclaimed, pumping her fists up and down in jealousy, "Oh man, I so want me some of that." She was expressing what every girl in the class was thinking. "Oh yeah, that whole expelling the lowest scoring student was a necessary deception. No one is going anywhere as of yet." Aizawa replied with a grin. The students gulped as he walked away, saying, "Go back and get into your uniforms, you still have the rest of the day, so I wouldn't rest on your laurels." Any of the other teachers could do something like similarly and they might not be lying. All Might remarked, "Aizawa, you're quite the liar. You have no problem expelling students, so what happened this time?" As he turned the corner and saw the huge man in the yellow pinstripe suit he had been hiding behind. Aizawa looked languidly at All Might. He pointed to Izuku and Katsuki, who appeared to be fighting as Tenya attempted to break it up, and said, "You're right, I would have expelled the last place student or all of them with no problem. The only thing that stopped me was those two." Before leaving All Might, who grinned his signature smile, he said simply, "Those two didn't give a damn about my test. It was all about pushing past the other, which made the others want to push past them. They inspired the other students to overcome their fear and do their best. That's what we need in heroes." "You're a kind man in your own way, Aizawa." Izuku was more than eager to end the school day after everything that Aizawa-sensei had put them through. As he left the locker room, he noticed Ojiro standing by the door. Ojiro said, "Do you have a moment, Midoriya?" And Izuku nodded. His question was met with a smile from Ojiro. "Sure thing, Mashirao, what can I do for you?" "Feel free to call me Ojiro for starters, but I wanted to know if you wouldn't mind sparring with me from time to time. My master has the deepest respect for Master Hamato and I would like to face one of his students. You know iron sharpens iron." Izuku finished for him before extending his fist to Ojiro, saying, "And brother sharpens brother." As Ojiro struck Izuku's fist against his own, he remarked, "Of course Ojiro, I'd be honored to spar with you and call me Izuku." The two decided to train at Dagoba Beach at the end of the week after exchanging contact information. Upon seeing Ojiro go, Izuku grinned and quickly left after grabbing his sneakers from his shoe locker. As he approached the front door, he was dragged into a dim corner. He went on the defensive right away, snatching the person by the wrist, only to discover that it was Uraraka, who was looking pained. As Uraraka smiled shyly, her eyes darting to and fro from his, he rubbed the back of his head in embarrassment and said, "I'm so sorry Uraraka-san, I just reacted." Izuku nodded, considering what this might be about. "It was my fault, I shouldn't have grabbed you like that, I just wanted to talk to you alone." He smiled and saw her eyes shine with unshed tears before she laughed and wiped her eyes. "Thank you for talking to the teachers on my behalf, Uraraka-san. I really appreciate it. That was really nice of you." She wiped her face, then turned to face Izuku and kissed him. "I was going to thank you for saving me during the entrance exam. You risked everything for me and now you're thanking me? You really are a nice guy, Midoriya." Izuku was taken by surprise. It seemed as though someone had turned off his brain. Uraraka kissed him and he simply stood there. It ended just as swiftly as it had begun. She exclaimed, "Like I said, tth thank you," and hurried away. Izuku listened to Uraraka's retreating footsteps while standing in the shadow of the school's entrance, a finger to his lips. It seemed like forever before Izuku left the school building and went home, not realizing that anyone else had been there and that she had witnessed everything. When she was certain that Izuku had left, she left the school and went home to devise her own plan for capturing the greenette for herself. "So that's how it is then, alright, I'm all in." After yesterday's events after school, Izuku was in a daze. Although he wasn't sure he ever wanted to taste Uraraka again, he could still taste her on his lips after brushing his teeth both this morning and last night. People were paying attention to him because his face was as red as a tomato. They were waiting for their teacher to arrive in class when Toru approached. It seems that today was hero study, and the class had a special teacher. Toru put a hand on Izuku's shoulder and asked, "Are you okay?" The boy jumped. In an attempt to allay Toru's worries, he clarified, "Hi Toru. No, I'm fine, just I'm excited for class today, didn't sleep much last night." Sitting on Izuku's desk, Mina said, "Or maybe you were up last night dreaming of a special girl and that's why you couldn't sleep. Had to get up early and change the sheets, hun. Boys sure have it rough." The boy began to perspire. "See here now, that is not a subject to be discussed in the classroom of all places, and it's Midoriya's personal business, you should respect that, Ishido-san," Tenya said, coming to Izuku's rescue. Mina shrugged and slid off Izuku's desk, revealing a small portion of her black and blue striped underwear before her skirt folded back into place. Mina walked back to her desk, saying, "Calm down, Ida, maybe if you relieved some of that stress more often you'd be more chill. It's not healthy to hold back. Right, Midori?" Toru also sulked and made her way back to her desk, while Uraraka sat with her head in her hands and her face red as her mind was filled with pictures of Izuku doing that while imagining her. "Oh no, Izuku is too kind to do that, but what if he did? What did he envision us doing, I wonder?" The classroom door opened, revealing All Might himself in his Silver Age costume, no less. Uraraka felt something wet hit her desk and looked down at a drop of blood. She quickly reached for a tissue as she realized her nose was bleeding. "I'm here to instruct," as the class was overcome with wonder at his appearance, he declared. "Can you believe it? It's All Might?" a red-headed child with sharpened teeth yelled. "Indeed, it is extremely incroyable," a blonde boy with glittering eyes said. "It's me, All Might, here to teach your hero studies class. However, before I do that, I'd like each of you to introduce yourself and your peculiarities in order of seating." He stood up and waved his hands at the class, saying, "I'm sure you didn't have a chance to get acquainted with all that tension on the first day." He was pointing to the blonde boy with the flawless hair. Before he sat down, he flipped his hair in the most opulent manner imaginable and said in a French accent, "My name is Yuga Aoyama, and my most merveilleux quirk is Naval Laser." Mina came next. "My name is Mina Ishido, and acid is my quirk." She winked and smiled before settling back into her chair. "I can produce acid from my skin that can eat through almost anything," she said. "I'm Suyu Asui, please call me Sue," said the next girl, who had long green hair and the most amazing poker face anyone had ever seen. "I can do almost anything a frog can do, which is my quirk." After saying, "Stay on surfaces, shoot my tongue out to 20 meters, jump extreme distances, and so on," she calmly sat down. My name is Tenya Iida, and my quirk is Engine, he said in a clipped voice as he stood next to him, his arms bent at perfect right angles. I can increase my running speed thanks to the engines in my calves. It's great to meet you all, and we appreciate All Might giving us this opportunity to introduce ourselves. You are a very serious man. After saying this, he bowed to their teacher, who timidly scratched his cheek. Man, I'm doing great at this teacher thing. All Might thought proudly as the next student introduced herself. Ochako got up, took a deep breath, and looked at Izuku, who was blushing and looking both to and away from her. You're welcome, young Iida. As the next person stood, Ochako sat down quickly and looked at Izuku, who was writing in a notebook. She noticed that he was switching to a new page as each student introduced their power, and she wondered what he was doing. My name is Ochako Uraraka, and my quirk is zero gravity. By touching something with all the pads on my fingers I can make something weightless until I release it by touching my pads together again. Before he sat down again, he flexed his tail and saw it bulge with muscles, saying, My name is Mashirao Ojiro, and my quirk is Tail. A blonde boy with a black streak of lightning through his hair came next. Hello ladies, this is Denki Kaminari, with his quirk Electrification. Put another way, he said, I'll give you a shocking experience. As he sat down, he winked at every girl in the room, drawing a number of amused looks. I'm Eijiro Kirishima, and my quirk is hardening, said the red-headed boy who spoke up first, coughing. He said, I can make my skin like stone. His hand stiffened, then he let it drop and sat down. The next boy got up, holding a rock-like head and a piece of paper that read, Koji Koda Quirk Anavoice. I can speak to and control animals with my voice. He sat down right away, as though standing would be too gregarious for him. A muscular boy with thick lips and brown hair was the next to stand. Sugar Rush Quirks with Raiki Osato. I get stronger the more sugar I consume, but my intelligence decreases in tandem. When Sato was the tallest boy in the class, he had a mask over his face, silver hair covering one eye, and one of his nubs turned into a mouth to speak for him. My name is Mezzo Shoji, and I have a quirk called Dupliarms that allows me to use one of them to replicate any part of my body. He bowed slightly and sat back down, saying, Nice to meet you. A girl with purple hair and earphone jacks hanging from her earlobes, one of which she was twirling with her finger, replaced him. Kyoka Jiro Quirk Earphone Jack. She gave Denki and the purple short stack a savage look as she said, I can plug my jacks into almost anything and then blast my heartbeat into it, even directly into someone's brain. Both of them let out a loud gulp. A black-haired boy with long arms and a broad smile came after her. He sat down and saluted the class, saying, My quirk allows me to shoot a tape-like material out of my elbows. The most unusual student of all followed him. A crow's-eyed boy said, You can call me Fumikage Tokiyami. As if to prove it, the shadow beast appeared in his stomach and gave a thumbs up. Yep, that's me. It said, then vanished as swiftly as it had appeared after Tokiyami sat down. My quirk is Dark Shadow. I have a sentient shadow beast within me that I use to do my bidding. A boy with blue and gray eyes and two-toned white and red hair, who had a big burn mark over his left eye, appeared after Tokiyami. Shodo Todoroki Quirk. Half hot, half cold. His voice was as flat as 2-day-old open soda, and his face remained the same. I use fire with my left side and ice with my right. Toru took his place, her uniform pulsing with eager energy. My name is Toru Hagakuri, and I have been invisible since the day I was born. No, it's not a choice. Sharing a class with you all is really pleasant. Let's try our hardest, she said, laughing merrily, and then took a seat. Knowing what Bakugo would do and not wanting to go deaf at such a young age, Izuku put his hands over his ears for what was about to happen. Listen up, all you scrubs, because I'm only going to say this shit once. If you get in my way, I'll quickly turn you jerks into ash because I'm Katsuki Bakugo Quirk Explosion. You in particular, fucking Deku. Katsuki turned to face Izuku, who was removing his hands from his ears, but he was still able to hear Katsuki clearly, and he sighed as he got to his feet. Thank you, Katsuki. He looked at All Might, who gave him a subtle nod, and said, Hello, my name is Izuku Midoriya. My quirk is Stockpile. I store energy in my body and then use that stored energy to augment myself. For example, my increased strength. After watching Izuku compete so fiercely with Katsuki, everyone thought the two were more alike, but it was like night and day when he spoke so eloquently. I look forward to spending the next few years with all of you, he said with a small bow before sitting down. Since One for All was a secret, Midoriya and All Might had discussed what to call his quirk. He needed to come up with a plausible explanation for everything, so they chose to only disclose the stockpile portion of the quirk rather than outright lying. "My name is Mineta Minoru, and my quirk is Pop-Off," said the shortest student in the class, his purple spheres gleaming in the classroom light. "I am able to remove these balls from my head and adhere them to any surface." Tossing the ball repeatedly in his hand, he said, "They don't stick to me, and they might stay for a whole day, depending on how healthy I am. I'd like to know everyone, but especially the girls." As he sat down, he spoke with a dark gleam in his eyes that made every girl in the class shudder. The final student rose with a courteous cough, and her figure caught the attention of most of the other students. Her flawless appearance, including her perfectly pressed uniform and coiffed hair in a bountiful ponytail, made her the epitome of decorum and order, and she spoke equally well. "My name is Momo Yaoyorozu, and my quirk is creation." As All Might clapped, she said, "It's a pleasure to meet you all. I can create any non-organic object given that I know enough about its structure. I hope you all start to develop your relationships and your eccentricities now that you have some knowledge about one another. Now, get dressed. The support companies worked hard on your specific costumes, and now we'll put them and you to the test," he said, pressing a button that caused tiny doors with each student's number to spring out from the left wall. Before opening the door and running off at full speed, creating a little dust storm as he did so, he told his class to get ready for whatever the pro hero had in store for them. "Get into your costumes and meet me at testing ground beta for your lesson." All Might was standing at the entrance to training ground beta when he heard footsteps and saw the students coming in their hero costumes. Yuga appeared wearing a violet sparkling cape and armor that looked like knight armor, with a red wing-shaped visor on his face and a belt that appeared to be more modified than usual. He seemed to move every few seconds to flaunt how amazing his suit looked on him. Mina emerged wearing a tight body suit with purple and turquoise skin, a white mask, and a vest with fur at the collar. Suyu wore a skin-tight black and green suit with yellow frog markings. Her heels resembled frog feet, and she wore goggles on her head. Iida wore full-body silver armor with engine pipes running down his legs and a helmet that completely covered his head except for his eyes, while Yuga only carried the knight motif so far. Izuku couldn't take his eyes off Ochako until he heard Mineta say how great this school was. He looked at the boy and shook his head, not sure if he should be impressed by his brazenness about his perversion or feel sorry for him because he would undoubtedly face harsh punishment in the future. Ochako was wearing a skin-tight black and pink bodysuit with pink boots and cushioned heels. Mineta wore a yellow cape, boots, and gloves along with a full purple bodysuit that covered his head like a mask. Izuku nodded at his friend's choice of hero attire, observing that Ojiro was staying true to his roots and simplicity while wearing a karate gi with a fur collar and a hole for his tail. A communicator of some sort was on Denki's head, and he wore an open black jacket with white lightning patterns, a white shirt underneath, and black pants with white lines running down the legs and boots. Ajiro wore a half cape with a torn hem, black boots, a belt with a red R in the middle, two dark red gear-shaped shoulder pads, and a wired guard over his face. Koda's hero symbol was a set of teeth in the middle of his chest, and he wore a bodysuit that was dark yellow and red. Rikido was dressed in white gloves and boots, a yellow full bodysuit that changed into a half-face mask where his brown hair protruded from a seam on top of his head. A bronze belt encircled light blue pants tucked into dark blue boots at the bottom of Shoji's suit, which was a two-tone blue sleeveless shirt that stretched upward onto his face, ending just below his eyes. With headphones on her ears, red triangles beneath her eyes, and a black choker around her slim neck, Jiro sported a black leather jacket, ripped pink shirt, black pants, boots, and a pair of white fingerless gloves with speakers along the back of her hands. Siro was dressed in a full bodysuit of black and white, a yellow helmet that resembled a tape dispenser with a black full-face visor, short costume sleeves, and white boots with elbow-length shoulder pads. Tokiyami was dressed in black boots and a black full-body cape. Todoroki had one glowing red eye and a shite long-sleeved shirt and pants. The left half of his suit appeared to be covered in ice from head to toe. Toru's costume consisted of light blue boots and gloves, which meant that Toru was standing there nude. Whether or not that was visible, it was a bold choice for hero attire, and Izuku felt a little embarrassed. Izuku saw that Katsuki's outfit was just as intimidating as he had anticipated. A black sleeveless tank top with an orange X across his chest. A pair of gauntlets that resembled vintage grenades, with the real thing adorning his belt, combat boots and baggy pants. A black and orange mask with flared ends, and brutal-looking knee pads that were sure to leave a mark on whoever they landed on. Momo's outfit was the most striking, It was a basic red leotard with a big orange belt that held an encyclopedia and red boots. Izuku's outfit consisted of a dark green full bodysuit with darker green patches on the back that formed a turtle shell pattern. A green wraparound mask was worn on top of his head, with the remaining fabric flowing around the back of his head. He wore black combat boots on his outer thighs, a holster for both of his Eskrima sticks on his outer thighs, and a utility belt with multiple compartments around his waist. "Whoa, Izuku. Who made your suit? That's fantastic, dude." Izuku grinned as Kirishima spoke. As the other students stared, he said, "Oh, my brother Donnie has his own support company. He and my mom worked together on designing this. You all look fantastic and very brave." Before beginning the lesson, All Might joyfully exclaimed, "All right, you zygotes, pay attention. Two-person teams will compete in a simulated indoor battle today. Illegal trafficking, underground transactions, and hostage situations all occur inside buildings under unidentified circumstances. This will be the foundational training's premise." All Might held up several rolls of tape between his fingers. "The heroes will be attempting to secure a WMD that the villains will be guarding by either capturing the villains with this capture tape or securing the WMD, of course, which means the villains only need to hold the weapon until time runs out or capture the heroes. These two boxes will be used to randomly select your teams, so don't come up and take control of your fate." The children all wore over-the-top much expressions as All Might spoke loudly. Unsure of how that would be received, Izuku was walking back from drawing his lot when he bumped into Toru and felt something squish against his arm. He jumped back and waved his hands in apology, saying, "So sorry Toru, I didn't see you there." She walked forward and drew her lot, saying, "No problem Midoriya, I'm usually more visual than I am now, don't worry about it." There was another incident involving the girls later, when Jiro tripped over Toru, causing both of them to fall into Mina and Uraraka, but other than that, nothing else happened before the team was revealed. The first team up would be Bakugo and Bakugo as the villains versus Tenya and Jiro as the heroes. Izuku looked over and locked eyes with Bakugo, who had a savage smile. It has been decided that Jiro and Midoriya will face Bakugo and Tenya. Tenya and Bakugo entered the building, leaving Jiro and Izuku outside to wait for the signal. All Might announced, "The villains will have 5 minutes to set up before the heroes are sent and everyone else to the monitoring room to watch." Mina, Toru, and Uraraka were all furious after seeing Izuku's letter in which he apologized to Toru for bumping into her. The three of them then tried to get the right one, but before any of them could check their lots, Toru and Jiro fell on them, causing them to drop their lots. This meant that they couldn't be certain who actually had the right lot, but it didn't matter now that Jiro was with Izuku. Izuku sighed with relief, still shaken by what had happened between him and Uraraka, and he couldn't have focused on the impending battle if he'd been paired with her. He turned to Jiro and grinned while holding out his hand, saying, "Jiro-san, right?" He said, "I'm happy to be working with you. Let's win this thing." Jiro gave him a perplexed look before shaking his hand. "Are you genuinely interested in this, or are you merely trying to defeat Bakugo? Why are you two together?" she asked, releasing his hand as the starting signal rang and the two entered the building. Jiro noticed a change in Izuku as soon as he entered the building. He seemed hyper-focused, and the look in his eye made her feel as though she was standing next to a lion. Her face flushed, and she bit her lip at the danger he seemed to be projecting. "For the majority of our childhood, Bakugo and I were friends, but after he developed his quirk, he turned into a bully. He became even more irate and started picking fights with me when I cut off contact and concentrated on my training. I've always tried to steer clear of that situation, but now I have the opportunity to show him the way and, ideally, influence him before it's too late." Izuku lunged towards Jiro, wrapping his arms around her as he pulled her out of the way of an explosion caused by Bakugo, who wiped away the smoke while staring at Izuku, who was on top of Jiro, who was lying on her back on the floor. Jiro smirked, "You really are a hero trying to save." She could feel the heat off his body and smell whatever body wash he was using, and it smelled so good that she felt like wrapping her arms around him, rubbing her thighs together. Kirishima was heard grumbling in the monitoring room. "A sneak attack Bakugo isn't manly at all. Bro," he said, punching his fists together before he felt a wave of malice behind him. He looked over to see Mina and Uraraka with intense glares on their face, and though he couldn't be sure, it seemed like Toru was equally furious. "See, you guys get it too." The girl's indignation validated Kirishima's statement, "That's no way for a man to fight." "Jiro, I know we didn't really have time to come up with a plan, but for now just try to locate Iida and the bomb. I'll hold off Bakugo and then come meet you." Izuku got up and helped Jiro stand up. Jiro nodded and ran away as Bakugo and Izuku stared down at each other. Deku, it's time for me to grind you to dust like the sandpaper you are. It's just you and me. He yelled and threw his right hook at Izuku. But Izuku caught his arm spin on his heel and slammed him hard against the ground, knocking the wind out of him. I am fully aware of you, Katsuki. Although you believed that you were torturing me over the past few years, you were actually providing me with the best instruction possible. As he stood above Katsuki, Izuku said, "You always start a fight with a big right hook." In response, Katsuki leapt to his feet and blasted at Izuku, only to discover the green had gone. "Now it's time I put that knowledge to use," Izuku said from the shadows. Mina said, "Whoa, look at those moves, Midori's really full of surprises." The other students agreed, and then they watched as the smoke from Bakugo's explosion vanished, only to discover Izuku gone. They all started looking at the numerous camera screens, but they couldn't find the green hero in training. He vanished. The only person who was unsurprised was Ojiro, who remained silent and kept watching as Mineta spoke while glancing around at the screens. Whispering to Jiro through his communicator, Izuku was concealed in a dark corner. "Jiro, are you okay?" Before the sound girl could respond, he asked. "Thanks for the save back there, I'm fine. Are you doing well over there?" In order to avoid being ambushed by Iida, she asked as she made her way through the hallways, pausing to insert her ear jack into the walls. Izuku said, looking around his corner and seeing Bakugo furiously searching the hallways for him, "I'm fine, I've got Katsuki trained on me. Now I have plan if you want to hear it." Izuku thought to himself, "I don't have a lot of time before he does something drastic," as Jiro responded. "Yes, it appears that you have this figured out. What do you need from me?" As she ascended a staircase, she inquired. "Find Iida, who is undoubtedly protecting the bomb. I will attempt to apprehend Bakugo and bring you together. It's the only way that Bakugo will know if I leave him alone. He will undoubtedly come to Iida knowing that I'll be there, and his explosions will probably blow the WMD apart rather than capture it. I want you to keep an eye on Iida because, despite his diligence, he won't leave that bomb's side. I'll give you the all-clear to carry out the final portion of our plan as soon as you locate him." This was going to be so rocking. Jiro nodded and grinned as she listened to Izuku's plan. "I can totally do that, dude, just let me know when," she said, grinning, and hurried up the stairs. Hit and run tactics. Deku Yukao. All Might tinkered with the camera controls in the monitoring room, changing it to infrared to see where Izuku was hiding. Just as he did, Izuku appeared above Bakugo, dropping down on him with an axe kick that the blonde blocked with his large gauntlet, before exploding again and engulfing the two in smoke. Katsuki received a kick to his right knee, dropping him into a kneeling position before he countered with another explosion, only to receive a stick to his left cheek, sliding him across the floor before he jumped to his feet. "Where are you?" When Bakugo stopped, he felt a kick to his chin that sent him flying, and then he backflipped in midair, sending an explosion straight down. Bakugo yelled, unleashing a spinning explosion ring around himself. Izuku avoided the explosion, feeling the heat from it as he slid back into the smoke, his eyes closed as he waited for Katsuki to land. Splinter had taught him how to fight without his eyes because it was necessary for his training, and he put a palm to the ground as he felt Katsuki land and run to where he'd last seen Izuku. Izuku got to his feet, moving slowly, listening to Katsuki's heavy breathing, then swinging at the back of his head with both of his Eskrima sticks, only for Katsuki to dodge and blast towards his stomach, which Izuku kicked to the side, soaking them both in smoke as he leapt over him, dropping Katsuki to the ground before jumping back into the smoke. The infrared was the only way the cameras could detect the smoke filling the hallway. "How is he doing that? It's like he's teleporting." Before turning to face Ojiro, Sato remarked, "Hey Mashiro, you mentioned that you knew Izuku's dojo. Could you tell me what he's doing? I know Izuku claimed to have had martial arts training since he was a young boy, but he never claimed that it taught him how to do this." As Izuku appeared out of nowhere and barely avoided a roundhouse kick to Bakugo's head, Sato gestured to the screen. "I don't know a lot about this method. I've never seen it up close before." Izuku received his ninjutsu training from the brilliant master Hamato Yoshi. However, according to my master, it's known as shadow stepping or phantom movement. Silently circling your opponent to confuse them, then striking them with a barrage of well-placed blows to take them out. According to what I've heard, this technique was adapted from a much more deadly ancient method that allows the user to kill their opponent in complete silence, leaving the victim unaware that they have passed away. The whole class let out a gasp when they heard that it was known as the silent killing. "There's no doubt that Midoriya is a ninja," Shiro yelled, staring at the screen as if it were a brand new toy. "I'm not sure, but ninjas don't fight like men do. You should confront your opponent directly and without any deception." Crossing his arms in disapproval, Kirishima said. Mineta was interrupted by Sue's tongue slapping him across the face. What no way ninjas are awesome, they can sneak into anywhere like a girl's dressing room. Midoriya is not that kind of pervert. Before All Might clapped to get their attention, Toru yelled. I can't say whether I agree or disagree with Midoriya's methods at this time, students, but it's crucial to make the most of every opportunity that presents itself. Who can tell me what Midoriya is using as a strategy? Yaoyorozu-san. All Might yelled as Momo and Ojiro raised their hands in response to his question. Indeed, Midoriya-san is using his history with Bakugo to his advantage by speculating about what Bakugo might do next. I can't explain how he moves so well because the smoke also blinds him, but I'll put it down to his ninja training. He's also using the smoke from Bakugo's explosion to outmaneuver Bakugo. Finally, Bakugo's stubbornness and temper work in Midoriya's favor as well. Rather than moving to a more advantageous area, Bakugo is choosing to tough it out, in the hopes of gaining the upper hand while wasting valuable energy, she said, inserting air quotes around the phrase. All Might gave a feeble smile at Momo's accurate assessment. Yaoyorozu, you're very good, but you can't ignore Bakugo's perseverance. Any circumstance can be made to work in your favor if you have patience and maintain your composure. Now there's no escape, Deku, Bakugo said, panting in the middle of the almost demolished hallway, his body covered in sweat and bruised. His gauntlet briefly glowed red as he grinned before sprinting to the end of the hall and leaning his back against the wall. I'm going to amaze you. I hope you're ready to die, he yelled, pulling back the trigger on his gauntlet, releasing a pull pin. The ceiling collapsed under the force of the explosion, and Bakugo watched as the ceiling above him broke apart. Bakugo yelled, sending an explosive wave down the hall, but the powerful explosion was too much for the already demolished hallway. You idiot, what were you doing? Izuku grabbed him out of the way as it started to fall and slam him to the ground, wrapping the capture tape around his wrists behind his back. Was it really that important for you to beat me? You'd put all of us in danger. Izuku yelled, lifting Katsuki to his feet. The boy looked up at him angrily as he asked, dropping Katsuki to the ground. Hun, why didn't you employ your quirk? What? You think you're so much better than me that you can beat me without it? Yelled Katsuki. Deku, you are nothing compared to me. Izuku shook his head as he glanced at Katsuki. Katsuki, you're captured because I just beat you, but that wasn't the point of this. You did all the work for me, so I didn't have to use my quirk. If you don't wake up, I wanted to show you what your pride will do to you in your career. What if that had fallen on you, or worse, you brought the entire building down on all of us? Izuku asked, pulling Katsuki to the area of the building that had been destroyed. Is destroying everything around him what a hero does? Izuku dropped Katsuki in front of the debris, saying, You're an incredible person, Katsuki, and you always have been, but your pride will hold you back or worse, destroy you. I suppose I'm also to blame. I shouldn't have allowed this to go on for as long as it did. I guess I wanted to exact revenge on you for all the bullying, but I was wrong to do so. We're not friends, and I doubt we ever were, but perhaps we could be. Izuku said, I respect you, Katsuki, but the way you are now, this isn't going to help you. He then hurried off to carry out the final part of his plan, leaving Katsuki in the ruins of his conceit. The whole building rumbled as Iida stood in front of the bomb in the top floor room. Bakugo, Bakugo, what was that? Enter Bakugo. Before All Might's voice could be heard over the public address system, Iida yelled into his communicator without receiving a response. Bakugo is in custody. Iida sighed, recalling Bakugo's tirade, thinking that something similar might occur. That loser thinks he can fuck with me. I'll put him in his proper place and show him. Iida prepared for a 2-on-1 fight by shaking his head. I will not relinquish this weapon in the name of villainy. Jiro rolled her eyes on the door's exterior. Jiro heard Izuku's voice in her ear at that precise moment. This guy takes himself way too seriously. Jiro grinned and plugged her jacks into the door, blasting it open while turning to face Iida. Jiro, I'm in position ready when you are. Give it up, hero. I'll never give you this weapon, haha. I knew you might try that, so I stuffed my ears with paper. Iida yelled as Jiro plugged her jacks into each of her boots and sent out 2 pulses of sound into the room, shattering the glass as Iida ran towards her. Before All Might could speak over the intercom, he yelled as he leapt into the air in preparation for an engine-powered kick. The weapon has been secured by the heroes. The mission of Jiro and Midoriya is complete. Jiro kicked out a section of the wall next to her, and Iida swerved to avoid hitting him. Jiro's eyes widened in surprise at the thought of nearly getting kicked by that. How? What? Izuku was seated atop the WMD when Iida turned to look back. To put it simply, I hung on the wall outside while Jiro sent out a huge sound wave that broke the windows. I went to take Jiro out because I knew you wouldn't be able to hear me over her noise, so I simply climbed through one of the broken windows, and now here we are. However, since you wouldn't have been able to hear her anyhow, I probably would have simply had her climb in a window if I had known you had jammed paper in your ears. After hanging his head in embarrassment, Iida removed his helmet and turned to face Midoriya, who shook his head and said, "You really are quite the strategist, Midoriya." As the three of them left the building, Katsuki trailing behind them, they entered the control room and he said, "Yeah, but I should have been here sooner instead of dragging out my battle with Katsuki. That was fantastic, Midoriya. You need to teach me how to sneak like that." As the rest of the class gathered around the victorious team, Mineta was stepped on. Nodding at the boy's quickness and agility, Ciro remarked, "Midoriya, how did you do all that disappearing stuff, and those moves were really cool, man. Why didn't you tell us that you were a ninja, man? If you did, would you have to murder us?" The idea of Midoriya slinking into his room and cutting his throat made Sato perspire a little. Izuku arched a brow and Tokiyami nodded, saying, "You and I are kindred spirits, both one with the darkness. Thank you, everyone, but we all gave it our all out there." He put a hand on her shoulder as she flushed and said, "Without Jiro, I couldn't have done it." Jiro twirled one of her jacks and said, It was nothing, just doing my part." Shoto frowned at Midoriya in the back of the room. All Might coughed, drawing the class's attention. "Amazing strength, analytical mind, Pete martial arts. I'm going to have to keep an eye on you, Midoriya Izuku," Shoto thought. "Yes, Jiro and Midoriya did a great job. Could someone please point out where either team made a mistake?" All Might said, a little hesitantly, "Yes, Yaoyorozu." This time, only Momo raised her hand. Bakugo separating on his own was the villain's first error. He prioritized his feelings over his duty to safeguard the WMD, and as a result, he and Midoriya fought for a long time until part of the building collapsed, putting the other participants, the weapon, and himself in danger. In the meantime, Midoriya prolonged the conflict beyond what was strictly required, causing a great deal more damage than could have been prevented had he rendered Bakugo incapacitated sooner. Having reached the same conclusion himself, Izuku rubbed the back of his head at Momo's assessment, which made it even more painful. Once more, All Might was at a loss for words when Yaoyorozu's assessment was presented. "Man, this girl is good. Very good, Yaoyorozu." After the first match was over, the other matches started seriously, with Yaoyorozu giving each student a detailed analysis of their weaknesses in combat, with the exception of Todoroki and Shoji, who dominated their opponents in their match to the point where Toru whimpered against Izuku's shoulder. "Izuku, you are aware of how hard I tried?" As Ojiro shook his head in disappointment at such a crushing loss, Toru spoke against his shoulder. Izuku patted her shoulder and tried his best to ignore her bare breasts against his chest, saying, It's all right, Toru, you'll learn for next time." He looked at Todoroki, considering how he would have handled it in Toru's place and coming up with very few effective strategies. After class that day, Izuku waited until he could get to Uraraka alone because it was time they had a conversation about what had happened yesterday. He found her on her way to the train station and grabbed her hand, startling her. "I apologize, Uraraka. I was hoping we could have a conversation." She nodded silently as he asked, and the two moved to the side of the road, where Izuku inhaled deeply before being interrupted. "I apologize, I shouldn't have given you that kiss." Izuku coughed and waved his hand, almost swallowing his tongue. No, I'm not sorry at all. I mean, we just kind of liked it. Was it a thank you kiss, or was it something more?" When Uraraka remained silent, he asked, rubbing the back of his head and biting his tongue in embarrassment. He opened one eye to see Uraraka shaking her head, her hands over her mouth, and tears still in her eyes. "There was a lot more. I was wondering if we could go out sometime because you're such a nice person, intelligent and kind." Before he even realized what she had said, Izuku felt his mouth move as she pulled her hands away from her mouth. As he and Uraraka were exchanging information, he pulled out his phone and said, "I'd love to." Just as Izuku was gathering his thoughts, Uraraka threw a stone into his gathering, scattering it once more. "See, may we give each other another kiss?" Izuku turned so red that he was fairly certain all of the blood in his body had simply gone to his head when Uraraka put a finger to her lips and asked. He said, well, you see, yes." He looked at Uraraka's lip as they drew closer until their lips touched, and she tasted even better than he remembered. He slowly put an arm around her waist, hearing a little eep as he did so, and then she melted into him even more, her lips so soft that they caressed his until they both needed air as they broke apart, They stood there panting, looking to and away from each other, and then Uraraka left, leaving Izuku alone. He stepped out onto the sidewalk and saw Toru standing there, and his eyes widened in surprise. Did she see us together? No, there's no way, right, but what would she say if she did? The thought was racing through Izuku's head as Toru approached him. When she approached him, she said, Izuku, you're still here. He didn't want Toru to see him that way, so Izuku was relieved that she hadn't seen him with Uraraka. As Toru took both of his hands in hers, he said, yeah, Toru, just heading home, what about you? She exclaimed. Izuku go out in a single breath. Izuku felt as though he had lost his breath. Izuku lost it after receiving 2 dates from 2 different girls in 5 minutes. I really like you, Izuku, and well, I want to know if you would go out on a date with me. Even though Toru was his friend, he was unable to do what he knew was right. She was most likely his only friend prior to Ua, and he knew it took a lot of bravery to say this. He didn't want to be that kind of guy, but he also couldn't hurt her by turning her down twice. Izuku saw tears hanging in the air as he looked up, bracing himself to turn down Toru's offer. His resolve was broken by the tears in her eyes. His stomach churned in shame, but he smiled sadly and said, of course I'll go out with you, Toru. After a brief moment of jumping up and down, Toru gave Izuku a hug. She exclaimed with excitement, you won't regret this, Izuku. I'll text you everything later. Izuku felt as though he had swallowed Mina's acid. She frowned as Toru left. I won't let you come between us, Uraraka. You may have got the jump on me asking him out first, but I won't lose to you. Izuku had just left the house thinking about the 2 dates he had unexpectedly gone on when Bakugo grabbed him by the side and pinned him to a wall. As though I already had too much on my plate. Bakugo looked at him and dropped his shirt, and he thought. Look here, I don't give a damn what you or anyone else thinks of me. I'm still going to be the best hero there is, but you did beat me, and that will be the only time, Izuku, you hear me. I'll be the best hero in my own way, not yours, so just stay the hell out of my way, he said as he left Izuku. Izuku stood there, lost in contemplation. With a slight smile on his face, he raised an eyebrow and asked, did he just call me Izuku? As he headed to Ua, a sense of accomplishment blossomed in his chest as he said, maybe I did change your mind a little, Katsuki. When the bell rang and Aizawa entered the room, Izuku sat down in the classroom. Seeing the erasure hero standing there made everyone in the class feel anxious. What will he have us do this time, man? As Aizawa started talking, Izuku felt his heart racing. The class exhaled in relief as Aizawa said, okay, today we are going to pick the class representative and vice representative. Then, everyone began yelling for their names to be put forward. Izuku considered who he would choose as everyone vied for the job, and Iida was the first person that sprang to mind. He was a rational person who was adamant about following the rules, and Yaoyorozu would make a suitable partner for him. She would be more likely to prevent Iida from going too far because she was more at ease. Iida raised his hand straight up in the air and yelled, everyone, please, this is not how we should conduct ourselves. Sue called out Iida's inconsistent words and behavior, saying, Iida, you want this more than anyone it seems. Iida removed his hand from the air and coughed. Yes, well, I think we should hold this to a vote. Whoever receives the most votes will be our class representative and the secondary person will be the vice class representative, Iida clarified. While Iida was adjusting his glasses, Kirishima asked, but wouldn't everyone just vote for themselves? How would that work? Well, yes, if everyone is selfish and only thinks of themselves, that will happen, but I believe that all of us as future heroes willing to put our lives on the line to save others are more than willing to do what's best for the class as a whole rather than for ourselves, Iida said with a wink. Aizawa put an empty box on his desk and said, just get it done, I don't care how. He was already in his sleeping bag. Every student pulled out a pen and paper, wrote down their ideas for the class representative, and placed them in the box on the teacher's desk. After everyone had cast their ballots, Aizawa got up and started going through them before declaring the outcome. Before Katsuki erupted in a yell, Aizawa said in a deadpan voice, the class rep with 3 votes is Izuku Midoriya. After looking around the room and failing to identify any of the offenders, he sat down and snarled while Uraraka whistled in the background. Which of you bastards voted for Izuku? He asked. In front of the class, Izuku and Momo stood, and Aizawa declared, with 2 votes the vice class rep is Momo Yaoyorozu. Izuku glanced at the entire class. He had never really desired a leadership role, so he wasn't sure about this, but he figured the book Leo had given him would be useful now. He was met with disagreement and said, are you guys sure about this? I don't really think I'm qualified for this. Kirishima gave a thumbs up and said, what, no way bro, you've got this. I definitely trust you as our class representative. As Bakugo growled, Jiro said, blushing slightly, yeah, you even went so far as to try and show Bakugo what a jerk he is. If you went that far for him, I know how far you'll go for the rest of us. Fuck you, earlobes, he yelled, furiously sitting in his chair. Izuku gave a nod of approval. With a bow to the class, he said, thank you all for the trust you have in me. I'll do my best to not let you guys down. The rest of the day went as planned, with Izuku eating lunch at the same table as Iida, Uraraka, and Toru. I'm glad to see you've accepted the leadership role, Midoriya. As one of the people who voted for you, I can't wait to see how you bring the class together. Iida replied with a brow raised. Iida sputtered, and Midoriya took a bite out of his katsudon and said, well, that's ironic because I used my vote on you, Iida. Iida repositioned his glasses and asked, what really did you think I would be a good representative? Midoriya looked at Iida and shrugged. Uraraka grinned as Iida removed his glasses, rubbed his eyes, and put them back on. You enforce the rules, trying to keep the class on the straight and narrow. You set a good example for what a hero should be. I think that's awesome and someone I can follow without question. Uraraka grinned and patted Iida's shoulder, saying, ah, Iida, don't cry. Iida narrowed his eyes as Midoriya tried to recall what he knew about Iida. No, it's just you reminded me of my older brother there. He said something similar to me once. As Iida coughed on the juice he was drinking, Midoriya asked, you said you came from a hero family, right, Iida? Your brother wouldn't happen to be Ingenium, would he? Iida looked at Midoriya in disbelief and said, how did you know? Midoriya shrugged back. As alarms began to sound and students started to rush out of the cafeteria, he remarked, it wasn't hard saying you came from a hero family and your engine Quirk, which has been a staple in every Ingenium. It was pretty obvious. Iida was able to seize an upperclassman who was walking by. Iida questioned, excuse me, what's going on here? What are the alarms for? The older student clarified that UA's perimeter had been breached and that all students were required to evacuate to the designated area in accordance with protocol. The class was waved out of the cafeteria by Midoriya, who had been listening in, but as soon as they left, 1A was engulfed in the rushing river of students attempting to leave as soon as possible. Jammed against the wall downwind of Iida, who appeared to be trying to explain what was happening after looking out the window, but no one could hear him, Izuku was pushed and shuffled like clothes in a dryer. Izuku watched with clenched teeth as Iida attempted to grab Uraraka. Although he was unsure of his strategy, Izuku trusted Iida and proceeded steadily before pushing Uraraka in Iida's direction, letting her make him float in midair before he threw himself through the air and landed above the exit. When he yelled, everyone calm down, it's just the press outside, we are not in any danger, he instantly calmed the assembly of students. As the students calmly left the school building, Izuku grinned. Izuku caught up to Iida and stopped him on the way back to class. Iida stopped Izuku in his tracks by holding up a hand and saying, Iida, I'm going to hand over the position of class rep to you after what you did at lunch today. Iida eyed Izuku down his glasses and said, Midoriya, I know what you're going to say and we both know that I wouldn't have been able to do that without your help. The taller boy patted Izuku's shoulder and turned to leave, saying, I know you pushed Uraraka towards me so that I could tell everyone what was happening. That is why you would still make better class representative. You help everyone without asking for anything in return, even with no recognition. I know you'll do great. Izuku grinned and sighed at his friend's confidence in him. After cleaning the classroom at the end of the school day, he and Yaoyorozu were the last to depart. Izuku glanced at the taller girl behind him. He had no problem giving it to her because he had seen the disappointed expression on her face when it was announced that he would be the class representative. However, he had to consider more than just himself. 3 individuals had decided to trust him, including Iida, who wanted the job more than he did but refused it even after Izuku extended the offer. Izuku inhaled deeply before approaching Yaoyorozu. As Momo turned to face the boy who was staring at him, he squeezed the handle of his broom tightly and said, Yaoyorozu, I know you really wanted the class rep position, and to be honest I think you would be a better fit for it than me. She wanted that job, and he wasn't mistaken. She didn't understand why people trusted Midoriya so much. She wouldn't say he inspired confidence as a leader, but he was strong, kind, and, to be honest, kind of cute with those freckles. He stepped closer to Yaoyorozu, who blushed at the close contact and took a small step back when she realized she was alone with a boy for the first time. I know I'm being selfish, but I want to give this my best shot even though I know I'm not all that qualified for it, but I can't let down the people who voted for me, at least not without trying, but I know I won't get anywhere without you by my side. I need you, Yaoyorozu, so please just give me a chance, but if you say no I'll understand and hand the position over to you right now. I'd rather try with your help than stubbornly hold on to something that I know I'll fail at without you. He raised his head in bowing. Momo had never experienced such blatant honesty before, and it left her feeling, to put it mildly, dizzy. She could sort of see what it was about Izuku that made people trust him when she looked at him right now. Momo let out a sigh before continuing. She held out her hand to Izuku, who eagerly shook it, and said, "Raise your head, Midoriya. I won't abandon you just because you got the position I wanted. I'll lend you my full support as your vice representative." Momo felt as though she was looking at a new star, and her heart skipped a beat when he said, "Thank you so much, Yaoyorozu. I'll try not to let you down either." His smile was so bright and honest. On a Friday evening, a woman's silhouette writhed on a bed in a dimly lit room. Her pelvis rose to meet the intrusive digits as her legs wriggled and her fingers worked on her core. "Izuku!" The voice exclaimed in ecstasy as she bit her lip and used the other hand to massage her breast and play with the pert nipple. Her mind was racing with pictures of the green-haired boy, and she imagined him stroking her. Her body suddenly tensed, and as she reveled in her afterglow, she flopped down to the bed like a dead fish, her chest heaving. The girl's face changed into a grin of pure satisfaction as she said, "Oh Izuku, I don't think I can wait any longer." Izuku got up early on Saturday morning, as usual, before the sun had even risen, and he ran to Dagoba Beach, where he landed his feet in the sand as the sun was just starting to rise. He started stretching while wearing his signature red sneakers and a long-sleeved shirt and jeans shorts. He was supposed to meet Ojiro here this morning for their agreed-upon sparring session, but right now, that was the last thing on his mind. All he could think about was the 2 dates he had with Toru and Uraraka. "Izuku, you okay?" Ojiro asked, having called Izuku's name multiple times without receiving a response, before clapping his hand on Izuku's shoulder and watching the green-haired boy almost jump out of his skin. He was still undecided about dating both of them, but the idea of turning them down made him feel sick. Izuku clutched his chest and exclaimed, "Ojiro," as he gazed at Ojiro, who had a worried and perplexed expression on his face. Standing there wearing a simple white t-shirt, karate pants, and black and white sneakers, Ojiro asked, "Are you all right, Izuku? You seem distracted." With a nervous laugh, Izuku rubbed the back of his head and said, "Oh no, nothing really, just enjoying the sunrise, you know." Ojiro, too, turned toward the rising sun and inhaled deeply of the briny sea air. After a few stretches and a fighting stance, he remarked, "Well, it is nice to appreciate the simple things in life." He raised his tail and asked, "Are you ready?" Izuku nodded and assumed a fighting stance. They both waited for a moment before Izuku threw a straight fist to Ojiro's face. Ojiro dodged it and swept his tail at Izuku's feet. The green-haired boy flipped out of the way and landed on his feet just in time to catch a flying kick from Ojiro, who then threw him over his shoulder. The boy dropped to his feet and stood there for a moment, staring down before they resumed their exchange of blows until Izuku appeared to lose concentration and was struck in the stomach by Ojiro's tail being flung onto his back. The blonde asked, "Izuku, are you okay?" and held out his hand to the downed boy, who accepted it and sat down on the sand while Ojiro sat down beside him. He rubbed his stomach a little and said, "Yeah, I'm good, just lost my focus is all." Having sensed that Izuku's head had been elsewhere since his arrival, Ojiro nodded. Izuku nodded in response to Ojiro's question, "That strike you used at the start was a sun fist, right?" Ojiro nodded in agreement as Izuku stated, which you countered with dragon sweeps his tail and then went into the shadowless kick. Izuku sighed and decided to trust Ojiro with his problem. "That you countered with horse drinking water. I knew you would be a good sparring partner. Now do you want to tell me what's got you in such a twist?" Ojiro asked. "I have 2 dates today, with 2 different girls. I don't want to reject either, but I also don't want to string them along just to avoid a hard decision." Izuku acknowledged that he was expecting a stand-up comedian like him to call Ojiro out on this behavior, but Ojiro put on a full poker face. However, as they say, still waters run deep, and despite his calm exterior, Ojiro was experiencing a range of conflicting emotions. He was initially pleased by his friend's apparent success with the other sex, but he was also a little envious because Izuku had secured 2 dates with different girls in a week. Being so outclassed was a bit too much to handle. As Ojiro considered what to say to Izuku, he calmed himself by taking a deep breath. Izuku nodded in agreement when Ojiro asked, "Well, I'm just going to go with what I think is best. I think you should go on both dates, after all these are first dates, right? I thought as much, so I think you should just go ahead on both. After all, expecting yourself to make such an important decision without getting to know more about them is a decision doomed to failure. There's always going to be that what if feeling if you didn't go through with one." After considering what Ojiro had said, Izuku nodded his head and had to acknowledge that he was correct. He couldn't just shut one down without getting to know her. Ojiro nodded in response to Izuku's question, but wouldn't getting to know them make it that much harder to break things off with one? As Izuku recited that statement to himself before getting to his feet, Ojiro responded, yes it would, but then you'd have a clearer choice and wouldn't regret it as much because in the end you have to choose. Izuku stood up and held out his hand to Ojiro, who accepted it. I guess so, but I don't want to keep this a secret either. I think being honest with them is for the best. Thanks Ojiro, you really helped me out. Before Izuku left, Ojiro gave him a fist bump and said, no problem, I hope things work out for you. Ojiro gave a headshake. Then he headed home, saying, maybe I'm the one who has it easier not having to weigh other people's hearts on a scale. Uraraka knew she was late and was hurrying down the sidewalk. She was running late after spending so much time deciding what to wear. As she turned the corner, she saw Izuku standing beneath a tree at the park's entrance. I hope Midoriya hasn't been waiting long. Nice going Uraraka late to your first date. She reprimanded herself. He wore jeans and his go-to red shoes with a long-sleeved shirt that was patterned after All Might's Silver Age outfit. When he glanced up and saw Uraraka, he waved to her, making the girl's heart skip a beat. With her hands clasped in front of her pink and white checkered skirt and her arms framing her breasts in her cream yellow shirt, she said, I'm so sorry, Midoriya. I know I'm late. Izuku gulped, scratching the back of his head and turning his gaze away from her chest. Knowing that he had arrived an hour early to be absolutely certain he wouldn't be late, he said, no, I haven't been waiting long at all. In an attempt to cheer herself up for being late, Uraraka smiled at his apprehensive lie. Izuku, you're very nice. As he extended his arm to her, she thought to herself and eagerly took it. As they started to enter the park and saw people having a good time on Saturday while thinking about work and school millions of miles away, he asked, so you said a walk in the park, right? As they walked arm in arm along the path, Izuku was at a loss for words to start the conversation, but then an idea suddenly occurred to him. He looked at Uraraka, who had a wide-eyed expression on her face before she exploded, and said, hey Uraraka, why did you decide to become a hero? I mean, your quirk could be useful probably anywhere you go. Construction would probably be the most useful place for you. Moving heavy building materials with your quirk would definitely cut down on the manpower needed and expensive equipment. She yelled, startling the boy with the green hair, that's what I've been saying for years. Uraraka flushed and covered her mouth. Sorry, it's just my parents own a construction company and once I got my quirk I thought the same thing you did, and they even have licenses for people to use their quirks in specialty jobs like construction and stuff, but my parents thought it wasn't a good idea. They don't want me to have to work a hard job like construction, so instead of doing that I thought if I became a hero and made lots of money I could provide for them like that. She blushed and touched her cheek. In an attempt to avoid coming across as a money-hungry girl, she questioned, that's a bad reason to become a hero though, isn't it? He looked down at her as she blushed and stared into his bright green eyes. I don't think so. I think that you're a great person for wanting the money to help your family. After all, it's not like you're just in it for yourself. You have a goal beyond just yourself and I think that's special. Izuku grinned as he recalled how he aspired to be like All Might, the symbol of peace, as a child. What about you, Midoriya? Why do you want to become a hero? My reasons have changed over the years. At first it was just to be like All Might and then it was to prove Katsuki wrong that I wasn't a Deku, but then once I helped you in the entrance exam it became clear to me. I just want to help people, no more, no less. I know what it's like to be powerless and I want to show people who feel like that there's always something more, something better. He said before chuckling and realizing he was rambling, turning to face her and feeling her lips on his again. He said, sorry about that Uraraka, I just got carried away. Before they parted, he pressed himself against her and indulged in the moment, blushing. When they heard a whistle and turned to see a food truck owner holding a parfait in each hand, Uraraka blushed and said, I'm sorry, it's just I think I fell for you all over again. As Izuku and Uraraka took one each, he remarked, you two are so sweet together, here have these on the house. Way to go, kid. The man exclaimed, winking and giving Izuku the thumbs up. As the two left to enjoy their sweets on a bench, Izuku flushed profusely. He knew what he needed to do right away to stop things from getting worse after hearing Uraraka say that she had fallen in love with him. Uraraka, I have something to tell you. I like you, I really do. I find you sweet, cute and a caring person, but I also have another date today with someone else, and it's not that I don't care for you, but I might also care for her. I'm not sure, but I owe it to her and to us to find out if there might be something there. I don't want to have any regrets in choosing you, and I feel like if I don't do this there might be this big what if hanging over our relationship. Do you understand? Izuku inquired as Uraraka gazed at her pastry quietly. To his surprise, Uraraka turned to face him with a radiant smile, despite Izuku's worst fears that he might have ruined something before it had even begun. Uraraka turned on the most lethal set of puppy dog eyes he had ever seen and said, I understand, Midoriya. You have to do this for us and our relationship. I totally get that, and I'm happy that you were honest with me from the beginning. But can I ask you something personal, just between us? With a swallow, he said, sure. Go ahead. Uraraka grinned appreciatively. Izuku gritted his teeth in response to Uraraka's question. Why does Katsuki call you Deku? Is it not short for Dekiru, as in you can do it? He didn't enjoy discussing it, but the background Uraraka provided made it clear to him how kind she was. Izuku balled up the empty wrapper of his parfait in annoyance at his former friend's cruelty. Well, thanks for giving Katsuki the benefit of the doubt, but no, when I was a kid, I wasn't very capable, and Katsuki thought it would be funny to change the letters of my name to mean Deku, as in worthless. When Uraraka realized how often she had heard Katsuki say that to him, she scowled ominously. Uraraka frowned at her unaware insensitivity, saying, I'm sorry for asking. I thought it sounded cool like the name of a really great hero, and I was going to ask if I could call you that too. Izuku laughed and grinned. As Uraraka grinned and gave Izuku a side hug, he said, Don't worry about it, that's in the past, and sure, after what you just told me I'd be more than happy to be called Deku by you. Izuku gave her a hug in return, and she exclaimed, Oh, thank you, Deku. Before they both stood up and left the park to go their separate ways. Uraraka bit her thumbnail as she left, reflecting on what she had just discovered. I can only assume he was talking about Toru, but I'm not going to back down from this. Izuku told me about this date because he's obviously going to choose me. But what if he doesn't? I'll be left out in the cold. I can't take that chance, but what can I do? She thought to herself. Around 5 o'clock that evening, Izuku felt as though an icy fist was clutching his insides as he gazed at the building in front of him. Looked at the blinking neon sign, he said, Toru, are you sure about this? Toru whispered in his ear while she giggled at his side and held his arm to her chest. The boy shivered as she started dragging him inside and whispered, There's nothing to be afraid of, Izuku. I'll make sure this is the best experience of your life. Toru wore a striped blue and white t-shirt, skinny jeans, and white heels to accentuate her full figure as she approached the counter. As she shifted from side to side with excitement, Izuku swallowed and stared at Toru's butt in those tight jeans. As they were led down a hallway and came to a stop in front of a door leading into a karaoke room, Toru turned around in time to see Izuku averting his gaze from her. She smiled as she took his arm once more. Toru sat beside Izuku, taking the tablet from the table and listening to the music, while Izuku was dragged inside and pushed onto the couch. Toru showed him a pop song that he had likely heard 1,000 times but had never bothered to listen to, and he exclaimed, Ooh, I love this song. While Toru began playing the song and singing along, he remarked, Well, you should definitely go first. I'm not much into music. As she merged with the rhythm, Izuku watched in awe of Toru's swaying body. He could almost see the happiness on her face as she allowed the song to move her, despite the fact that she was invisible. This was his favorite thing about Toru. She was contagious, spreading joy and happiness to everyone in her vicinity. She was like the sun, showering everyone in her vicinity with beams of joy. As their drinks arrived and Toru took a sip of her pink lemonade while Izuku swirled the straw in his soda, Toru fell down beside him, panting a little. He observed how her throat moved with each swallow and how her chest rose and fell with each breath. Watching her left his mouth as dry as the Sahara. Leaning against him, she whispered, Izuku, I never did properly thank you for saving me. Her hair tickled his nose, and she smelled like peaches. She giggled a little as she nuzzled him. Izuku laughed as she put a hand on his stomach and felt the hard muscle there before moving her fingers across his abs and whispering, You smell good. He grabbed her hand and said, Toru, stop, I'm ticklish. As the other hand began dancing along his ribs, he collapsed to the side in a fit of laughter, unable to stop Toru from climbing on top of him to carry on her attack. Izuku bucked up and slammed his pelvis against hers, knocking the wind out of her as he grabbed her arms and held them at her sides. Say, uncle, Toru exclaimed. As the last of his giggles died down, he inhaled deeply to gather himself. His eyes widened as he glanced up at Toru and then at her seat. He then attempted to get out from under her, grinding himself against her until she gave a little squeak and settled down on the couch. He heard Toru say, Toru, I'm sorry about that, really I am. The boy broke out in a sweat as she slid closer to him and said, I felt it, Izuku. Before Izuku stopped her, she reached for his zipper and said, "It's okay, I don't mind really." He looked at her and held her hand in his, saying, "Toru, I do feel that way about you, but I don't think we should go there just yet. Today I had a date with Uraraka and I'm going to tell you what I told her. I like both of you, but I don't know which one to choose, but I know I can't have you both, that's why I went on both these dates today to see if I could sort this out. I like being with both of you. Toru, you were my first friend in a long time and I love being around you. You brighten up everything around you," he said while massaging her cheek and gazing into what he thought were her eyes. He sighed and said, "I need time to make a decision, but I wanted you to know how I felt." She cupped Izuku's face and said, "It's okay, Izuku. I understand. You're such a good guy. I bet you were tying yourself in knots about this, weren't you? It's a little sad knowing I wasn't the first to ask you out, but you still said yes. You risked everything to spare my feelings by telling us both the truth. That's the reason I like you so much," she said, kissing him, crawling into his lap, putting her legs around his waist, and putting her arms around his neck. "You're everything I want in a boy, and even if you don't pick me, I know you'll still be the best friend I'll ever have." It seemed as though he was her willing victim and she was an octopus in love. Toru was desperate to make this moment last as long as possible, and he could feel her passion seeping into his body. Izuku didn't want to let Toru down, so he squeezed her against him and ran his hands through her hair, letting her aroma fill his nose as they kissed and then came up for air. Toru climbed out of his lap and rearranged her clothes while Izuku stood up, both of them panting. He opened the door for her and they stepped out into the cool night air, saying, "We should probably go, our time's almost up." He offered her his arm once more and said, "Let's get you home, Toru." The two then left through the dimly lit streets before being stopped by a few well-known people. Well, if it isn't the little shit who ambushed us and stole our test subject." Izuku turned to face the speaker, a tall man with slime hair cascading from his head. Beside him were two other well-known figures, Squidface and the Lizard Man, and there were also a number of other men who were all staring at Izuku and Toru for attention. As the group moved toward Izuku and Toru, Slime yelled, "What a surprise meeting you again. Now I can pay you back for what you did to my face," while pointing to the scars on his face. Izuku remained in front of Toru as they were gradually escorted into an empty alley. "Izuku, what are we going to do?" Toru asked. Before he heard something and ducked, dragging Toru with him as a spray of blood covered the walls where they had been, he clenched his fists, ready for battle. Slime looked on in disbelief as Squidface and Lizard Man collapsed to the ground, headless. He looked at Izuku and Toru and exclaimed, "What the fuck?" Before turning to face the rest of his group, he discovered that they were all equally dead and that a man wearing a cloth mask and red scarf was standing there. He gazed at Slime with the ferocity of the sun and the chill of a blizzard, his long, jagged blade smeared with blood. Before attempting a palm strike, the man slid sideways and dropped his sword from the hand Izuku was holding, catching it with the other, and swinging, forcing Izuku to release it as he leapt back from the blade. The man moved, and Izuku found himself moving as well, blocking the sword swing at the man's wrist. The two were standing on the alley's opposing walls. Slime and Toru stood motionless as the man asked Izuku, "Why would you protect this scum?" Izuku looked directly into the stranger's eyes and said, "He may be a criminal, but I can't let you kill him, even he deserves the chance to change his ways in the future." The stranger grinned. The stranger hurried Izuku, said, "Splinter has trained you well, boy, but he's still not willing to do what's necessary." Then, he leapt above him onto the wall, threw a knife at Slime, and climbed up the wall to the building's roof. When Izuku realized he had been tricked, he activated his full cowl and rushed forward to seize the knife, but it entered Slime's eyes too late. Izuku's face was permanently frozen in that shocked expression as he watched his body fall in slow motion before hitting the ground. Toru came to embrace Izuku, and he fell to his knees. As Izuku looked down at the dead thug, she took out her phone and called the police, asking, "Izuku, are you okay?" He muttered to himself, "I couldn't save him, I was right there and I couldn't keep him from being killed." He felt a great deal of guilt over this failure. How could he have prevented any deaths despite having this new power? The police came swiftly, took statements from Izuku and Toru, and then released them. As Izuku was leaving, he overheard one of the officers making remarks about the crime scene. As he bid Toru good night, Izuku kept in mind the thought, "Hero killer Stain strikes again, but this is the first time he's saved someone, what's his deal? He goes around killing heroes and then suddenly decides to off some thugs. Doesn't make sense." He was forced to review the battle with Stain because he knew all of the moves and, worse, he was familiar with Master Splinter. What might all of this mean? When he arrived home and entered his room, he was troubled by thoughts of Stain and his failure to save that criminal. As he dozed off, he muttered to himself, I failed, I couldn't save him. Izuku looked around the room, but it was so dark that he couldn't even see his hand in front of his face. That is, until he realized that his entire body was blacked out from his eyes down, as though it were a part of the room itself. Suddenly, he heard a multitude of voices. He had struggled and failed to move his body at all, and without a mouth, he was unable to even call for help wherever he was. Izuku looked in the direction of the voice, but all he could see were some dark shapes in the distance. Can you believe how fast this is happening? One of us will meet him soon, she said. Another voice said, I told you he was special, believe itl, and then a female voice could be heard. The voices abruptly stopped as if someone had closed a door, and in front of Izuku stood a thin man who resembled All Might in his true form, with long hair that covered one eye. I know this is exciting and all, guys, but remember he is a lot younger than any of us were when we inherited One for All. It's our job to teach him how to use this power. As such, I think that. Before he spoke, the man smiled softly. He gave Izuku a moment to take in what he was saying before continuing when the boy nodded. Sorry about them, they're just excited about meeting you is all. I know you must have questions and I'll try to answer them in the time we have. I'm the original user of One for All, and the voices you heard before were the people One for All was handed down to. You are the most compatible person I've seen with One for All. You see, One for All isn't just a quirk, it's a collection of people's consciousness and powers. As such, it has a consciousness of its own, and it seems to like you, so much so it has started to open up to you, giving you access to its stored power and us. This was causing Izuku's head to spin. Though nothing like this, All Might did inform him that One for All had been inherited by several individuals and had stored their power. Before the darkness started to fade around Izuku, the man smiled like All Might's and said, no doubt you're asking why Toshinori didn't tell you. It's because he doesn't know. One for All has never opened to anyone like it has to you. The closest I can think of was when it let me speak to Tashi's predecessor, allowing me to tell her of a change within One for All itself, but nothing like this. I just want you to know that no matter what happens, we're here for you. You are not alone, you carry all of us with you. Izuku yawned as he opened his eyes while sitting up in bed. He recalled bits and pieces of his previous dream, the most significant of which was. Izuku grinned as he got out of bed and started his morning ritual after hearing the words, you are not alone, you carry all of us with you. He was thinking about the fight from last night as he went about his morning. He knew what he had to do today, so he said, Stain, as he left the restroom and returned to his room. Izuku went into the kitchen to watch his mother prepare breakfast after putting on one of his many All Might shirts and jeans. He grinned as he approached her from behind and planted a peck on her cheek. He sat down at the table and said, Morning, Mom. His mother had just placed a plate of toast and eggs in front of him. Her son choked on his freshly buttered toast as Inko said, Morning, Izuku, you slept late today, usually you're gone before I get up. That date you had yesterday must have really taken a lot out of you. Izuku stared at his mother in disbelief, his heart thumping. How did you know? He exclaimed, clearing his throat with a sip of orange juice while his mother flashed a Cheshire cat smile. As she spread jelly on her toast and Izuku sat there eating his eggs and blushing, she smiled and said, I'm your mother, Izuku. I noticed things like my son getting ready for a date. As Izuku started shoving food in his face to get past this awkward mother-son conversation, she winked and said, I hope I get to meet this young lady soon. He put his plate in the sink and drained the juice from his cup, saying, I'm going to the dojo for a while, I'll be back later. Thanks for breakfast, Mom. Izuku hurried to the front entrance and out the door after putting on his shoes, and Inko giggled a little. She smiled at her little boy as he grew up and said, I can't wait to tell Hisashi. Izuku tried to focus on the task at hand and keep his mother out of his mind when he got to the dojo. Master Splinter was sitting at the front of the dojo, sipping tea, when Izuku slid the door open. His morning training must have just ended. With a sigh of satisfaction, Splinter put down the tea and opened his eyes. With Izuku sitting in front of him, Splinter said, Izuku, good morning. What brings you here this early? Splinter nodded, signaling Izuku to continue. Sorry to come by so early, Master, but I had a question only you can answer. Izuku inhaled deeply before beginning. Izuku looked into Splinter's glassy eyes and said, I met a man last night, he was using our techniques, to kill people. He murdered several men in front of me. They weren't good men, but they didn't deserve to die. I was hoping you might know who this is. His master appeared to be a million miles away. Splinter let out a tremulous breath and briefly closed his eyes. Then Splinter stood up and said, Izuku, This isn't something we should discuss. I have nothing to say on this matter. Sorry you came here for nothing. Izuku shook his head, biting his lip as he considered leaving. Before the older man turned around, Izuku stood up and stared at Splinter's back. Sensei, please. This man killed people in front of me using our techniques and I couldn't stop him. I tried to protect one and I failed. I wasn't able to save him. Please, you have to tell me who this is. Izuku said. Yoshi gazed into the expressive eyes of Izuku. Splinter could tell that the boy was deeply affected by this man's passing because he had his heart on his sleeve. Before returning to his seat, Splinter remarked, Izuku, your compassion is remarkable. He then waved for Izuku to follow suit, which he did. The man's name is Oroku Sake, and he was once my brother in training. I was older than him by a decade, but I looked at Sake as my younger brother, both training under my father. Both of us had a strong sense of justice and pursued heroics, but even then I knew without a quirk no one would accept me as a hero, so I protected this area as a vigilante while Sake went on to pursue a career as a licensed hero. Our paths split at that point. I found love in my wife Tang Shen and stopped being a vigilante, but Sake grew displeased with hero society and began exerting his own justice, killing villains instead of taking them in. When he thought of these terrible times in his past, Splinter rubbed his forehead. Splinter swallowed hard to contain his tears, and Izuku felt his anguish. At the time I didn't know this. I was too involved in myself to notice what was happening to my friend until Tang Shen was killed. He was aware of Tang Shen's significance to his master. It was terrible for him to put Splinter through this, but it was necessary. Sake was murdering people, and it seems that she had been doing it for a while without getting caught. It was an accident, drunk driving kids. Sake came to me wanting for us to get revenge for Tang Shen, but I refused. I couldn't do that to Miwa. I couldn't make my daughter an orphan, her mother killed and her father a murderer. Sake saw this as an affront to Tang Shen's memory. A woman he thought of as an older sister. He killed those kids and I didn't stop him. It was only after he had done the deed did I confront him. We fought, but I couldn't do what needed to be done. I let him go and excommunicated him from our dojo, but I couldn't live with the guilt of having let him kill those kids, so I left Japan with Miwa heading for the US. I had only recently returned when your mother asked me to train you. I had my reservations, but the look on your face back then, the determination to follow your dream gave me hope, and now seeing the man you've become lets me know I made the right decision. Splinter said while placing a hand on Izuku's. Don't do what I did. I let Sake go because of our past. Don't let the murder of those men cloud your judgment. If you choose to pursue him, do it the right way, understand? Promise me you won't break the rules for him or to catch him. Izuku nodded once, gazing into Splinter's amber eyes. The boy got up and walked away, and he grinned and filled Splinter with pride as he said, I promise Sensei I will bring Stain to justice the right way or not at all. You shouldn't feel guilty about choosing not to seek revenge for your wife. It was an accident, and though I never met Tang Shen, I think she would be proud of your choice. The following day, Izuku went back to school. Since it was his first official day as class representative, he was excited to repay everyone for their faith in him. Izuku led the morning greeting to their homeroom teacher as Aizawa entered. Every student complied with the instruction, stand, bow, good morning, Mr. Aizawa. Be seated, before taking their seats once more. Izuku exhaled, relieved that he hadn't forgotten or said anything incorrectly. Before Aizawa started talking, he caught Uraraka giving him a sly thumbs up out of the corner of his eye. As the students made their way to their locker rooms, he said simply, good morning. Today we'll be going to one of the training fields, so get in your costumes and head out to the bus. The typical male camaraderie was evident in the boys' room as they talked about their weekend activities. As they put on their clothes, Ojiro glanced at Izuku. So how'd the dates go? Ojiro asked in a low voice, but it seemed like it wasn't low enough because Mineta was pulled away from trying to listen to the girls through the wall and instead focused on Izuku, who pounced on him before Izuku caught him on guard. Halfway through putting on his suit, Izuku yelled in shock, Mineta, what are you doing? As the purple midget writhed in his hand like a furious ferret. Mineta yelled, who was your date with Midoriya? Warning the other boys of the impending crisis. Denki, who was seated on the bench closest to Izuku, exclaimed, what, no way Midoriya had a date with who, tell us? Bakugo, Todoroki, and Tokiyami were among the majority of the male students gathered around the green-haired boy. Izuku turned to face Ojiro, who apologized by raising his hand vertically in front of him. At that point, Izuku was bombarded with inquiries about his partner. The thick veil of tension emanating from Uraraka and Toru made the girls' locker room as quiet as a crypt, in stark contrast to the noise the boys were making. The other girls watched as the two dressed slowly, making a concerted effort to keep their breathing quiet. As Momo started to tighten her gloves and zip up her uniform, Sue asked, "What's up with those two?" The creation girl shook her head. As she approached Toru and Uraraka, she said, "I don't know, but we can't let this continue. Pardon me, girls. I know we're not that close, but it's my responsibility as vice class rep to make sure everyone in the class is doing well, so what seems to be the issue?" Momo felt a shiver down her spine as she stepped back, thinking, "No, I can't. Midoriya is counting on me to help keep this class in order. I can't let him down," she asked as Toru and Uraraka turned to face her, radiating death and malice. She then stepped forward, only to have Mina slide in between the three of them. "Isn't it clear? It has to do with a man?" Uraraka blushed as she yelled, and based on Toru's fiddling fingers, she was also clearly embarrassed. "What the fuck? It's not tea." When Mina's outburst caused the tension to completely leave the room, Uraraka objected and hurriedly got dressed as Toru slid past the other girls and out the door. The girls left the locker room, with Jiro being the last to leave, pulling her earphone jack out of the wall with a red face. Izuku was the last to board the bus after making sure that no one was left behind, and he climbed on and started walking towards one of the only seats that were open next to Sue, oblivious to the numerous looks of disappointment from the other girls who had each had their extra seat taken. Midoriya had a date, with whom? She thought as she followed her fellow females outside and met up with the boys as they gathered onto the bus. Izuku, still remembering his failure, said, "I hope you don't mind Asui." He was thinking about what he had learned from Splinter and then about Stain himself. Looking at Izuku, the frog girl said, "Not at all Midoriya, and please call me Sue." She felt sorry for him, wondering what could have caused the boy to be in such a state. "Midoriya, what's wrong? You look sick," she said, removing Izuku from his contemplation. "Asui, it's nothing." He told her a half-truth because he didn't want to admit that he had allowed someone to die in front of him. I couldn't help somebody when they needed it is all. "Were you friends with them?" As Izuku shook his head, she asked, observing him with interest. As the eyes of that thug flashed across his vision, Izuku said, "No, I didn't know him at all. He wasn't a good person, but I think he could have been a better person if given the chance. It just sucks I couldn't help him." His fellow students looked at him gravely, to know that the Greenettes felt sorrow for not helping a complete stranger, one who he claimed wasn't a good person no less. From his seat next to Sue, who took Izuku's hand, Kirishima remarked, "Wow Midoriya, that's heavy bro. Izuku probably appreciated your attempt even if you were unable to assist him. Take comfort in that." Sue patted Izuku's hand and then released it, making the Greenette smile before Katsuki voiced his thoughts. "Izuku, stop being such a whiny bum. Try not to be such a pussy the next time." The other pupils sighed in frustration as Katsuki yelled. Kirishima said, "Come on Bakugo, that's not cool man." Denki shrugged. Denki remarked, "He's just being himself I guess. We all know Bakugo's personality is flaming shit mixed with garbage." Katsuki's eyes were staring straight into the electricity user's face. "Shit stain. What did you say?" Sue noticed a new light in Izuku's eye as he smiled and Bakugo yelled. While Izuku shook his head, Sue said, "What's with that smile Izuku? Bakugo just laid into you pretty harshly." Sue touched her chin thoughtfully, and Mina sat across from Izuku, licking her lips and staring at the boy. "That's just Katsuki's way of telling me to do better. He knows I'll wind up doing something like that again if it comes down to it." As Momo and Uraraka gazed at the green-haired boy, both enamored by his strong sense of justice, she thought to herself, "He's such a good guy. I wonder what he's hiding under all that sweetness. I hope it's something naughty." Toru was a little conflicted because she knew who Izuku was referring to and she couldn't say she agreed with him completely because that guy had attempted to attack her and the only reason he and his friends had been there was to exact revenge on Izuku for stopping him. Karma was not to be taken lightly, and Jiro remained stoic, but even she was moved by Izuku's fervent desire to help everyone he could. As the students filed out of the bus and were met by none other than Rescue Hero 13, Aizawa said, "All right, that's enough, we're here, everybody off the bus. Everyone say hello to your guest instructor 13, she will be in charge of your exercises today." Aizawa clarified as the class greeted 13. As she led the class into the enormous building that housed 5 different areas, 13 said, "It's a pleasure to meet you all and welcome you to the Unforeseen Simulation Joint, or USJ for short." Izuku found it hard to believe they were still inside a building. Today's lesson will comprise you all carrying out mock rescue missions in each of the 5 zones. Those are the mountain, landslide, conflagration, ruins, flood, and downpour. Natural disasters of all kinds, from forest fires to earthquakes, occur every day. As heroes, it is our responsibility to use our skills to help those affected by these tragedies. I am aware that some of you may be wondering how your peculiarity could aid in a rescue effort, but that is untrue. My quirk is Black Hole, one of the most destructive forces in the universe, but I use this quirk to clear debris and remove harmful materials, but if I'm not careful I could accidentally kill someone, and that goes for any quirk, 13 said, pointing to one of her fingers. Izuku nodded, taking in the information. It must have been divine luck that he would be participating in rescue operations today. Perhaps he could have handled Stain's attack differently if he had known what he was going to learn. However, as 13 went on with her speech, Aizawa turned abruptly as a black shape formed in the center of the USJ Plaza. As he watched, figures began to emerge from the steadily expanding portal. As Kirishima stepped forward, the students noticed their homeroom teacher's attitude and said, "I thought we were doing rescue op." Aizawa stopped his student's approach by holding out a hand. "Remain back. The exercise does not include this." 13 safeguards the kids. Kaminari attempts to communicate with the main building. Izuku approached Iida, attracting the attention of the taller boy. "I'll hold them off," Aizawa said, pulling his goggles down over his eyes before he bounded down the stairs and engaged the main villains after erasing their quirks. As Iida glanced at him, he whispered, "Iida, you need to leave and warn the teachers outside." Before Kaminari broke the bad news, Iida remarked, "But Midoriya Kaminari is already working on that." The lightning blonde said with disappointment, "Sorry guys, no go, there's something blocking my transmissions. We're completely cut off from the outside. You see, we need you to leave and alert the other educators." As the warp gate user materialized in front of them, Izuku remarked, "You're the fastest of us after all. Sorry to interrupt your school day, students, but we desperately need to have a word with All Might and we're told he would be here today, but since he doesn't seem to have appeared just yet, I'll have to ask you students to keep my comrades company for a while. Students, stand back while I hand." After removing the cap from one of her fingers, 13 moved forward and started sucking the warp gate user in her direction. However, she had to stop her attack when Bakugo and Kirishima leapt in the direction of the villain, disrupting her attack line before she was eventually pulled into the villain's portal. As he started to engulf most of the class, the villain said, "How rambunctious, you all deserve a timeout." Izuku glanced at Iida after he successfully rescued Uraraka from the portal. "Remember, Iida, you must leave this place," he yelled as the darkness engulfed him, only to emerge seconds later above a vast body of water and smashing through its surface. He opened his eyes to find nothing around him, then began swimming to the top when he saw a swift shape approaching. "I apologize, kid. I'll try to finish this quickly." He waited for the villain to close in, but before he could flick his finger, Tsuyu appeared, slamming her feet into the villain's face before jumping off him out of the water and dragging Izuku with her onto a nearby boat. Izuku took a deep breath as he sat up, only to hear someone talking before a purple body was slammed onto the deck next to him. The shark-like villain snarled, opening his mouth wide as Izuku curled his finger. He wasn't sure if this would work underwater, but he had to try. "Mineta, are you okay? Thanks for the save, Asui. I wasn't sure how long I would have lasted without you." Mineta sat up and looked over the railing at the group of water villains. Izuku said, checking to see if the boy was still conscious after a hard slam like that. He appeared to be fine as Izuku turned to Asui, speculating about what might have happened to cause her to slam him onto the deck in that manner. "Don't thank me. We're still in danger. I told you to call me Sue." As Izuku cupped his chin and considered his options, Sue said in her customary monotone, "They have us surrounded and outnumbered. Look, all we need to do is remain where we are, and the heroes will arrive and handle this. Besides, it's not like we can do anything. Look at these guys," Mineta remarked, pulling on Izuku's suit. As one of the villains made tiny waves with his hands to keep the balls away from him, Mineta yelled, throwing off a couple of his balls and then pointing to the pointlessness of his attack. "Mineta, are you certain you want to be a hero?" Sue asked, looking at her in the classic Asui fashion. The boy with the grape hair glared at her as a result. "Frog girl, stop talking. I want to be a hero, of course, but we're not going to succeed." As he saw the green-haired boy ogling the villains and their response to Mineta's balls, Mineta said, "Tell her, Midoriya." "Mineta, we can't wait. They will eventually either board the boat or, more likely, sink it and come get us once we're in the water. I may have a plan, but I can't carry it out without both of you, so we must fight." As he looked between the two green-haired people, Mineta's eyes welled up with tears. "You two are crazy. Like you, Midoriya, not all of us are fierce ninja warriors." Izuku put his hands on Mineta's shoulders and lowered himself to a knee. "You two are badasses in your own right, but I am aware of that, We can all get out of this together if we work together, but I can't save all three of us. Good, now here's the plan, he said, glancing between Sue and Mineta, who after a moment nodded in agreement. I need you to trust me, both of you. A villain in the water, fed up with waiting, swung his hand to create a wave of water that split the boat in two, watching both halves sink just before a child leapt over the railing, green lightning arcing around his body. Stupid move, kid. With the intention of tearing him to pieces, the attacking villain yelled. Full cowl smash 100%, as he saw Mineta throwing ball after ball into the swirling villains, causing them to clump together into one large mass. Izuku looked back at Mineta, who was bleeding down the left side of his face, and grinned. Izuku punched down towards the water's surface, the pressure of his blow carving through the water, pushing it outward all the way to the lake's floor, creating a fist-shaped hole there before the water began to wash back in. Mineta, that was really awesome, Sue grinned as Izuku gave Mineta the thumbs up. As they landed close to the lake's edge, overlooking the conflict between Aizawa and the villains, she remarked, the two of you are badass. The other students at the USJ entrance watched as 13 used her entire quirk to attack the warp gate, slowly drawing him in her direction. Give up, villain. I won't let you hurt these students, she shouted, increasing her suction. The students looked on as Iida stared at the front door, Izuku's words in his head. You have to get out and warn the teachers, Iida. Tenya stood up looking at the door. Midoriya put his faith in me, I can't let him go. Iida noticed Uraraka smiling by his side when he felt a hand on his shoulder. The battle between 13 and the warp gate took a turn at that point when a portal opened behind 13, turning the suction of her black hole on herself and tearing through the back of her suit, seriously injuring the hero. Uraraka pushed Iida towards the door as she ran to 13 with Mina, saying, Deku trusts you, Iida, so we're going to do everything we can to help you. Uraraka stated that even though she was worried about Izuku, she had to assist Iida as Izuku had requested. As the boy spun around and ran straight for the door, she yelled, but the warp gat was right on him. I will not permit you to ESC. Shoji wrapped Kurogiri in a web of flesh and severed his head. Now get out. Iida ran to the door and pulled it open as he rushed through, and Shoji yelled, squeezing tightly around the warp gate. Thank you all. I promise not to disappoint, he yelled back, using his quirk to the fullest, and sped off from the USJ. The ringleader of this attack said from behind his mask, You're slowing down, Eraserhead. The time between your cancellations is getting bigger and bigger. Gripping his teeth, Aizawa rushed the villain and slammed an elbow into his stomach, only to have his elbow engulfed in pain. Aizawa stood in the center of a circle of downed villains, his hair falling back over his eyes as he panted there, covered in sweat, and felt as if his eyes were covered in sandpaper. He couldn't hold this up for much longer. What happened? My arm is useless. Aizawa hissed, leapt back, and looked at his elbow, which was completely destroyed, the skin flaking off like old paint, revealing muscle fiber and bone. This moment of distraction allowed the giant creature that had been accompanied by the hand-mask villain to get a glimpse of his face before he was slammed to the ground, face first, as the creature slammed its massive hand on his uninjured arm, breaking it completely. Before his face hit the floor, he let out a painful scream. As Kurogiri materialized beside him, Tamura remarked, Oh man, I was sure All Might would be here by now. I regret having to inform Tamura that one of the students managed to get away and is undoubtedly bringing reinforcements. Tamura sighed after giving Kurogiri a fierce glare and scratching at his neck, saying, I propose that we retreat. With a sudden appearance in front of Izuku, Mineta, and Sue, Tamura said, All right then, but I suggest we leave All Might with a parting gift, such as the death of his precious chicks. Izuku was filled with sick dread after witnessing what it did to Aizawa's elbow, but as soon as he touched Sue, nothing happened. You really are so cool, Eraserhead, Tamura said, grinning widely as he glanced over his shoulder at Aizawa. As his fist struck something that kicked up dust and sent the water receding from the coastline, dragging Mineta and Sue away from him and the villains, Izuku used this moment to launch himself from the water in full cowl and channel 20% of One for All in his fist. The dust soon dissipated, revealing the form of Nomu standing there, not moving at all from the strong punch he'd taken to the gut. Izuku gritted his teeth as he tried to jump back, but was stopped by the iron grip Nomu had on his forearm. Sue and Mineta were paralyzed in the face of Nomu's brutality as it proceeded to punch Izuku's body deeper and deeper into the ground, and Izuku's vision grew dim as the pain drained from his vision, leaving him in a world of black. Izuku felt his bones straining under Nomu's strength before he was lifted off his feet and slammed to the ground. He felt his arm jerk at an agonizing angle, indicating his broken bones. Izuku attempted to break free from Nomu's grasp, going all in with 100% of one for all, but he was lifted into the air again, coughing up blood. As Izuku looked around at the black atmosphere of his surroundings and recalled this place from his dream, he heard footsteps and turned to see a small red light approaching him. The light grew larger by the second until it became clear that the source of the light was a man, whose body glowed a brilliant red hue, soon bathing the entire area in red, including the black parts of Izuku's body that had previously been dyed in the man's color. The man was slender and muscular, wearing sandals, an open long-sleeved red button-down cardigan, blue pants with big cuffs and a yellow sash around his waist, and a straw hat with a red band across it to top off his disheveled black hair. He was grinning broadly, crinkling the scar beneath his left eye, and his most striking feature was the X-shaped burn scar across his chest. "Well, it looks like I made it here before the others could stop me. Shishi, I'm Luffy, the sixth holder of One for All, also known as the Pirate King in my day, and you and I are going to bust up that bird brain something good," the man said, laughing as he sat cross-legged in front of Izuku. He slammed his fist into his other hand and yelled. Unable to see the red steam emanating from the boy's body, Nomu moved away from its victim and toward Shigaraki. In his actual form, All Might rested against the back of the couch that he had been using since arriving at UA that morning. The worst part is that Principal Nezu's long, drawn-out speeches are holding him captive. He had foolishly overreached himself this morning and was unable to attend class. Even though All Might greatly respected the principal, this was getting close to being torture. Nezu climbed onto the back of the couch and looked directly at Toshi, asking, "All Might, are you listening?" Raised from his inner turmoil, All Might leapt, coughing up a little blood and moving so abruptly. All Might changed into his buff form and opened the lounge door, saying, "Of course, Principal Nezu. I was just thinking maybe it's time I head out to the USJ, make an appearance at least." As All Might waved and hurried out of the room before the principal changed his mind, Principal Nezu sipped his tea and said, "Oh, very well, All Might. I'm surprised I was able to hold you here this long, but go ahead. I might even be able to offer some advice on rescue techniques if I move quickly." As he increased his speed even further, All Might thought to himself. Izuku cocked an eyebrow at the man named Luffy in front of him. What is that Maya? King of the pirates? Why would someone entrust One for All to a pirate when they're evil, don't they? He pondered as Luffy got to his feet and threw a few punches, utterly oblivious to Izuku's predicament and unable to respond because Izuku's body wasn't fully developed in this world. Luffy grinned once more as he glanced at the boy. Pulling his cheek almost a foot away from his face, he said, "Don't worry, kid, I'm going to help you out. My quirk is totally the best to beat that guy to a pulp. My body's rubber, see." He then allowed it to snap back into place. The absurdity of Luffy's eccentricity almost caused Izuku's eyes to pop out of his skull. "So blunt force doesn't work on me, but I'm not sure what exactly it'll be like for you. One for All has been boosting all our quirks while storing them, so my quirk might be a little unwieldy at first, but that's why I'm here. I'll guide you with it, giving you all my knowledge, and together we'll send that guy flying." Luffy extended his hand to Izuku, who took a moment to examine it. His only understanding of the situation was that this man would assist him in defending his friends from evildoers, and that was sufficient for him. Izuku managed to move for the first time since finding this location and took Luffy's hand in his. As Nomu approached him, his fists covered in that boy's blood, Tamura Shigaraki was clapping his hands. Tamura exclaimed, "Ha ha ha, well done, Nomu," and clapped like a child who had just witnessed an incredible stunt. Tamura was interrupted from his gloating by the sight of an explosion of steam coming from the hole Izuku had been beaten into. "That'll teach these kids to respect their elders," he exclaimed. A figure stood in the center, and a tall pillar of red energy spewed out of it like steam. The steam was so dense that it was visible from the doorway. Mina squinted her eyes and asked, "What is that?" as she and the others watched. Prior to the strong red steam rising from the crater, Mineta and Sue had climbed out of the water and were attempting to get close enough for Sue to remove Midoriya's body from the hole. Unable to see what was happening, Tamura exclaimed, "What is duh?" Then Nomu's hand appeared in front of him, splashing him with the creature's blood. He yelled angrily, "Nomu, what are you doing?" as he attempted to wipe the blood from his face, only to discover that Nomu's hand had been totally destroyed and was undergoing regeneration. Tamura had a clear view of Izuku at that point. He was topless and his pants were torn, and his suit was ruined. The reddish-black sheen that covered Izuku's arms and legs ended just in front of his shoulders. Above his head, Izuku's green hair was a flaming haze. As he gazed at Nomu, whose fist had just regenerated and the creature was screeching like a bird, Izuku let out a breath and steam came out of his mouth. Tamura was unaware of the boy's fate, but since Nomu was supposed to murder All Might, the youngster had no chance. Tamura chuckled and gestured to Izuku, saying, "Give it up, brat, nothing you do will work. Nomu has regeneration, shock absorption, and incomparable strength that not even All Might can match. Kill him, Nomu." The beast charged at Izuku, seemingly slashed by a whip. Sue yelled, "Midoriya, get out of the way," because she didn't want her friend to suffer anymore. However, Izuku either couldn't hear her or decided to disregard her advice, pulling his right hand back and folding the first two joints of his fingers inward before raising his left hand palm out as though to signal Nomu to stop. Izuku heard Luffy's words in his mind. "Just wait for him, line him up with the tip of your left index finger, keep him there and then fire." Izuku waited until Nomu was within striking range, at which point he made a sound akin to a whip crack and flew backward, the ground around him cracking under the impact of the blow. "Listen to this." H9GEPQBSSVK Izuku uttered the words, "Mamba Smash." Just as he appeared to vanish from view. Before stopping and rising, Nomu made two furrows in the ground by pressing its hands into the ground to slow its flying body. As the wind swirled around the impact, Izuku appeared above Nomu, putting the soles of his feet together and kicking downward towards Nomu, who punched upward. The two attacks clashed. Izuku yelled, "Spear smash," as Nomu extended his other hand to try to seize Izuku's legs. However, the boy kicked off the giant's fist and landed a few yards away from the beast, leaving the two of them staring at each other. Nomu appeared to be oblivious to the pain as he fell to the ground, grabbed hold of Izuku's leg, and started swinging the boy in a circle, slamming him into the trees of the small forest they were in before dragging Izuku toward himself. Izuku had stretched his leg back before whipping it forward and kicking Nomu in the knee, shattering his skull knee-pad and bending the joint backward. He raised his arms in front of him in an X, and Izuku heard, "Block now," as he watched Nomu's fist strike his arms. Instead of hearing his bones shatter again, as Izuku had anticipated, Nomu's fist sank into his arms before he was flung upward toward the ceiling. In Izuku's mind, Luffy said, "Shishishishi 1 for all really is amazing, it somehow made my rubber quirk tougher than it was before." Having a better understanding of his power now, Izuku said, "So it's more like the vulcanized rubber on tires then." At Luffy's command, Izuku spun in midair and slammed into the ceiling, his arms sinking into themselves to cushion the impact. He hung there for a moment before jumping to the side to avoid Nomu, who had launched himself into the ceiling after him. "Yeah, like that now, turn around and dig your hands into the ceiling," Luffy said. Izuku nodded, throwing his right arm back and then yanking it forward as Nomu began climbing over to him, leaving him completely exposed. Izuku was about to slam his fist into his face, but Nomu sidestepped. "Now you've got him, throw your fist back as far as you can and then let him have it," was the statement. "Oh no, he escaped." Izuku thought he could still hit Nomu with his attack, but Luffy yelled, "No, I believe in you one for all, there's nothing we can't hit." Python crash. He shouted as red electricity crackled along Izuku's arm, turning it at two angles to slam into Nomu's back, driving him from the ceiling. The massive creature began to fall. "That was amazing, now finish him with this. Lower yourself from the ceiling, then extend your arm behind you and twist it in a corkscrew motion." My go-to rifle smash was this. Izuku thought that the form he had adopted was best suited for the snake style he had learned from Master Splinter. Being able to stretch and strike swiftly from unexpected directions was the pinnacle of the style, so he had named all of his attacks after snakes, and this one would be no exception. Luffy said this in his mind as the green-haired boy followed his lead. All of USJ stared up at the glowing figure that was Izuku as he fell from the ceiling like a meteor on re-entry, his arm stretching to its limit as he spun it around and then pulled it back towards him, his fist unwinding at blistering speeds, his arm starting to glow with the friction of the air before bursting into flame. Music stop. The bright figure in the sky caught Katsuki and Kirishima's attention as they looked up from the villains they had defeated. "Is that Midoriya?" As Katsuki stood beside him, his fists clenched and a sour smile on his face, Kirishima asked, shielding his eyes to get a better view. "Izuku." He snarled as he continued to stare at his former victim who was now in front of him. Staring up at the figure in the air, Todoroki raised his head from his spot in the landslide zone and said, "Midoriya, you're full of surprises, aren't you?" Unbeknownst to him, Toru, who had been hiding behind a rock to avoid freezing, gazed at Izuku and shook in wonder. He said, "Izuku, how amazing are you?" she asked herself. Both the electrical villain who was holding Kaminari hostage and Momo and Jiro, who were under threat from one of the villains, gazed up at the false star in the sky. Jiro took advantage of this moment by connecting Jack to the speaker on her leg and sending a sound wave into the man, knocking him unconscious and releasing the stunned Kaminari. As she assisted the electrical user in standing up, Jiro grinned. Like Momo, who clutched her chest, Jiro blushed and said, "That's our class representative for Ya, helping us out whenever he can. That kind of guy is relying on me. What will I do? I wonder." Momo bit her lip and thought. All of the students cheered as they saw Izuku defeat the monster that had so viciously attacked their teacher at the entrance. "Go, Midoriya, you've got this, hun." Ochako grinned with tears in her eyes as Mina yelled. "How is a girl meant to keep up with you, Izuku? You never stop moving forward." Amid the applause, she inquired. Music for resumes. As Nomu bounded forward with his fist, Izuku looked down at him and exclaimed, "Sidewinder smash." He shouted as his fist connected with Nomu's gut, exploding in flame as the monster was dropped to the ground in a massive plume of smoke, with Izuku landing next to him, his springy legs absorbing the shock completely. Tamura and Kurogiri stared at the boy as he stood there seemingly victorious, only for the rubble of Nomu's crash to be thrown away as the burnt creature stood up, beginning to heal the damage. "What, he's still standing?" Izuku's muscles felt like they were on fire, and he said this as his body started to steam more. "We can't stop now, but we're almost at our breaking point. We're very near." As Midoriya lifted his fists and heard Tamura laughing nearby, Luffy uttered those words in his mind. "Fool, did I not tell you? No matter how severely you strike Nomu, he will absorb it and heal. He is my master's ultimate creation, designed to destroy All Might," Tamura exclaimed with delight. Luffy interrupted Izuku by yelling in his mind, "I can't beat High." "You certainly can. No one is unbeatable. We'll beat him until he can't heal if he can. We will hit him more than he can withstand if he is able to absorb hits. We never give up and we never stop." Nomu held up its arms to block the blows as it continued to advance on Izuku, but there were simply too many getting through. For every one Nomu blocked, 10 more got through until his encroachment was halted, and then began pushing him back, each fist hitting like a missile. Luffy shouted his unbending will, infecting Izuku as he smiled and clenched his fists. Energy crackled around the boy's fists, forming into the heads of 2 snakes before throwing them forward repeatedly, each faster than before, until it appeared as though Izuku's arms were growing in number. Hydra. Izuku threw both of his hands forward, slamming the 2 huge snake heads into Nomu's chest after pulling them back as far as they would go. Smash! Nomu was lifted up and slammed backwards, slamming into the USJ wall before soaring through it and out into the distance. The ground shattered beneath him. "Shishishi, nice one, kid. I'm glad I was able to fight with you. Don't stop here, we're all waiting to see how far you go." Izuku's body fell to the ground, the steam from his body finally stopping, and Shigaraki and Kurogiri gazed at the unconscious boy in front of them as he watched the vanishing figure of Nomu as the world gradually turned black around him. He could hear Luffy's voice fading with each moment. "No, that isn't possible. He couldn't have defeated Nomu," Shigaraki yelled, scratching at his neck with blood dripping from the many cuts. Shigaraki's hands dropped from his neck as he began to advance slowly at first, then he plunged into a dead run as he advanced on Izuku's body, his hands outstretched, before he was thrown far to the left by a huge impact on his side. He rolled on the ground before Kurogiri caught him and he saw the frowning face of the top hero. All Might said, "I appreciate you guys' help, but I'll take it from here." This alerted the 2 villains to the presence of Bakugo and Todoroki, 2 boys standing on either side of the unconscious Midoriya. A tiny ice wall shielding Izuku's unconscious form as Bakugo snarled, Todoroki said, "I would be ashamed of myself if I allowed our class rep to be killed before my eyes. Shitty Izuku wasn't the reason I was here. All I wanted was another opportunity to blow their asses up," Bakugo yelled, looking at Izuku's unconscious body. Izuku had gone above and beyond the call of duty, but All Might had expected nothing less. "But I would appreciate it if you 2 could get Aizawa and Midoriya far away from here while I deal with these 2. All Might wanted nothing more than to smile right now. Shigaraki and Kurogiri were seen retreating into a portal as All Might snarled and turned to face them. Tamura glared at All Might and then at Izuku's shielded form as the portal closed behind him. Kurogiri warned, "We've lost Tamura, we should leave." All Might got up from his fighting stance. He had wanted nothing more than to pursue those 2, but his priorities were Aizawa and the rest of the class. When the other teachers arrived with Iida, All Might was throwing the remaining villains onto an already enormous pile. All Might said, "I'll be back, students." Then he vanished, only to reappear in the other zones of the USJ and begin incapacitating every villain there. As he and the other teachers started checking the students for injuries, Present Mike remarked, "Aw man, looks like the party's over." Fortunately, it appeared that only Aizawa, 13, and Midoriya had been hurt, and they were all taken to Recovery Girl. All Might, this is awful. Looking at the students, Principal Nezu said, but it seems that this experience has given them much knowledge in what it means to be a hero. All Might shook his head, knelt down to the principal, and whispered, "To think that Ua was invaded by villains. If you hadn't gotten here when you did, this could have been much worse." "Nezu sir, that isn't true. I arrived here just a few minutes before you did, and from what I've been told, Izuku Midoriya was the only student who did the heavy lifting." Nezu's face didn't change much, but All Might, who had known the enigmatic creature for a long time, could tell he was shocked after he battled and defeated the creature known as Nomu. "That's what happened, I see. On the way over, we called the police, and they just told me that they had discovered a big animal far away. I assume it's the Nomu." Nezu climbed onto All Might's shoulder and said, "I think we should pay Midoriya a visit." However, the other students in Class 1A stopped the top hero before he could depart. "How are Mr. Aizawa and Midoriya doing?" As she assumed her position as vice representative, Yayorozu was asked. Kirishima pounded his chest and said, "Yeah, Midoriya went all in like a man, we gotta see him." Aoyama swished his cape back and forth and said, "S'il vous plaît, I must wish him well. Seeing my twinkling visage will no doubt ensure a speedy recovery. Children, please, there will be time to see Midoriya after Recovery Girl gives the okay, and we've spoken with him," Principal Nezu said, raising a paw to calm the nervous students. As All Might and Nezu went to the nurse's office, they discovered Recovery Girl there giving a sleepy Izuku the finishing touches. Disappointingly, the students obeyed Nezu's instructions and were escorted back to the school building. "For the time being, please follow Ectoplasm back to class." Izuku tried to stand up but fell back onto the bed, saying, "All Might, you're okay." All Might helped Izuku lay properly in the bed and said, "Easy there, young Midoriya. You've pushed yourself really hard today." "That's an understatement. He's so tired that any questions you have for him will have to wait. I need to talk to you, Mr. Symbol of Peace, more than anything else." Recovery Girl hit All Might in the back of the knee and said, "I've called a cab for the boy, and one of the teachers will make sure he gets home safely." "Yes, ma'am." Before Izuku called out to him, All Might started to follow Chio while massaging his leg. The boy's eyes were drooping when All Might turned to face him and said, "I saw one of them, All Might. The previous users of One for All. Before you go, I have to tell you something." Before falling asleep, he said, "I saw the Pirate King." All Might glanced at Izuku, uncertain of his meaning. "Who is the Pirate King?" All Might shook his head when Nezu asked. All Might crossed his arms in contemplation before Chio coughed to get his attention. "I have no idea, sir, but I do believe Izuku when he said he met a former user of One for All. Gentlemen, first things first. After my recovery, Izuku is completely worn out, and his muscles are his top concern. They appeared to have been torn apart before I was able to heal them, but based on what the students told me about the teachers, he should have more injuries. Organs ruptured, bones broken, but nothing." As the two men absorbed this new information and gazed at the boy at the table in even greater awe, she said, "I don't know how to explain it," while sitting down and tapping her cane. Kurogiri sighed as Shigaraki entered the mahjong bar, grabbed the closest chair, turned it to dust, and kicked over a table. Their master then spoke, cutting off the childish outburst. "Tamura, what's wrong?" As Tamura gazed at the screen at the rear of the room, All for One asked. "Master, Nomu failed. He was taken out by a child who had multiple quirks, and he never saw All Might." As his doctor interrogated Shigaraki, All for One scowled from his position. "A child defeated my Nomu. He was flawless, which is impossible." "Well, you quack, perfection lost you." Before All for One spoke again, Tamura yelled. "Tamura, what peculiarities did he possess?" As Tamura sat at the bar tapping his fingers against the surface, All for One asked. "Strength for one, and he could stretch really far." All for One scowled as he recalled a man wearing a straw hat, rubbing his stomach as the image of multiple fists striking him was forced out of his subconscious. Izuku opened his eyes slowly, looking towards his own room's ceiling rather than the nurse's office, and as he turned his head to the side, he saw a plate with a sandwich on it and a glass of water. His stomach growled, but he smiled as he sat up to feed himself, and then he noticed that he was still wearing his school uniform, and something was in his pants pocket. He recalled that his hero costume had been completely destroyed, so clearly someone had dressed him in his school uniform before sending him home, and as he reached in, feeling a bundle of cloth, he pulled it out, and unfurling it to reveal a pair of purple and black underwear. What the fuck? After shouting, he covered his mouth in the hopes that he hadn't woken his mother. He was looking at his underwear when he pulled out a note, noticed how wet the paper was in his hands, and blushed intensely as he tore the folded note apart and read the words. Izuku swallowed hard as he stared at the note and the panties in his hands. He knew the address on the note wasn't from Toru, whose house he'd visited multiple times, so who were they? Give these back when you're ready. I won't wear any others until you do. Don't make me wait or do if that's what you're into. Looking at the ruins of his hero costume, Izuku put on his school uniform once more and sighed as he put the ruined costume in its case and was ready to heft it onto his shoulder when his mother came and took the case away. Oh man, Donnie worked so hard on this. Izuku, I'll take care of this. Given how worn out you were, I don't think you should be attending school, but the least I can do is bring this over to Donatello and, though I doubt I'll have to, explain what happened. Everyone in the nation is aware of what transpired there. As she brushed her son's hair and sighed, Inko said, good thing none of you kids were hurt. She laughed and said, just like your father, I never met a cone that could tame that hair of yours. Izuku blushed before leaving. His thoughts naturally shifted to the biggest mystery of all as he traveled to school, the wadded up pair of underwear he had in his backpack. It's unbelievable that I have those with me, he said. No, I have to return them as soon as possible. Come on, there's a girl at school going all commando. I could have just gone back home after school and got them, he said, shaking his head. Izuku arrived at Ua, and before he could even enter the school completely, All Might materialized in front of him, his yellow pinstripe suit stretched across his enormous frame. He said this in a quick whisper to himself, which caused people on the street to give him a wide berth all the way to school. The pro hero put a big palm on Izuku's shoulder and said, excuse me, young Midoriya. I hate to pull you away from class, but there is an urgent matter we must discuss. Izuku nodded quickly and hurried past the hero to the lounge room, eager to keep All Might from his backpack, as if he was certain the hero could detect the offensive garment in his bag. Izuku sat in the lounge with All Might, who was conserving his waning strength by returning to his true form. First of all, I want to apologize for being late, young Midoriya. All Might said, bowing his head in shame as Izuku waved his hands. I wasted my energy and forced you to accept a large burden because of my foolish actions that morning of stopping so many crimes on my commute to work. No, I wouldn't consider placing the blame on you, All Might. You demonstrated your heroism by showing up when it counted most. Izuku said, thank you for keeping all of us safe. All Might sighed, aware that he had been beaten, and he could never persuade Izuku that he had neglected his responsibilities. After waking up in the nurse's office, Izuku arched a brow in an attempt to recall what had transpired. Well, all that aside, Midoriya, I want to talk to you about what you said to me before falling asleep after the attack. Izuku recalled the man who went by the name Pirate King and remarked, oh yeah, about Luffy. They were talking about the same individual, so All Might confirmed, yes, the Pirate King you called him. You said you met with him, correct? Yes, it wasn't just him, Izuku said, nodding. I've been dreaming about one for All's former users. All Might's eyes widened at this statement. I met the Quirk's creator, and after Nomu knocked me out, I met Luffy the Pirate King, who taught me how to use his quirk and helped me beat Nomu. You made use of his oddity? Is it still usable? Izuku hadn't attempted to use that power since waking up, so All Might inquired as to whether this was a one-time offer or something he would have going forward. He stood up and activated his full cowl, saying, well, I can try. He said, I can feel the power, but it's like it's out of reach or something. He held up his fists, focusing on it, and he could definitely feel something there, but it seemed to be just out of reach. He then let his full cowl fall as he sat back down. I'm sorry, young Midoriya, that I can't be of more assistance, All Might said, nodding and cupping his chin before deciding it was best to let it go for the time being. Izuku would have to trigger it himself if it was something he could still access. He put a hand on Izuku's shoulder and stood up, saying, but I will help in any way I can. What do you think we meet up this weekend here at one of UA's training grounds and see exactly what this new quirk has to offer? Izuku grinned as he got to his feet. I've never experienced any of what you've told me, nor did my own master mention anything like this to me while I was under her tutelage. Before leaving for class, Izuku said, that sounds great, All Might, I'll see you then. He was genuinely relieved that All Might would be there to support him during this difficult time. Izuku was startled to see what he thought was a mummified Aizawa when he walked into the classroom. Mr. Aizawa, he said, examining the man with the bandage. Izuku took his seat as Aizawa started talking, and he said, yes, it's me, now take your seat, Midoriya. I know what happened at the USJ was unsettling, but if you plan to be heroes you're going to have to learn to shake these things off and move forward, he said, pointing to Izuku's seat with a bandaged hand. The point is that the sports festival is quickly approaching. Everyone has seen it at least once. The sports festival, which is bigger than the Olympics, is your opportunity to leave your mark and prove your abilities to the world. Your skills will be evaluated by heroes from around the world, and if they think you are good enough, they will offer you an internship at their office. After a brief pause, Aizawa said, "One chance per year, 3 in a lifetime, so I suggest you don't waste their time and put your best foot forward. These internships have the power to launch your career and position you for success even before you graduate." "Ah yeah, this is a chance to go all out and show what we're made of," the 1A students said, discussing the significant opportunity that was approaching them. Kirishima remarked as she turned to face Bakugo, who was grinning like a cat cornering a mouse. "There, you peons have no chance against me. I'm going to enjoy wiping the floor with you, Izuku. You two half and half," he yelled before turning to face Izuku. Bakugo yelled, highlighting Izuku and Todoroki, but Ochako, who exuded an enormously powerful combat aura, was the most determined. "We're going to wreck the house, Deku, so let's get started," she yelled, startling Izuku, who had never seen this side of Uraraka before. Izuku leaned over as she stood there, trying to make sure Uraraka wasn't the one losing his breath. He was fairly certain based on the address on the note, but he still needed to be certain. However, as he was adjusting to his new position, he sensed someone beside him and turned, almost pressing his face against Minetta's. "It's nice to meet you here, Midoriya." Izuku sat up, staring at the purple short stack who gave him a twisted smile, and said, "Don't worry, I'll keep your secret, Midoriya. If you ever need something to get you through the weekend, I've got you covered." "Izuku had no idea you were a fellow comrade." Izuku shook his head and Mineta said, "It's the least I can do after getting me out of that situation at the shipwreck zone." Mineta then gave a thumbs up and left. Izuku sat up when Aizawa called the class to attention once more and started his lecture. When lunchtime rolled around, Izuku got up and looked at each girl in his class, thinking, "How on earth am I going to find out who it is?" Before spotting Yaoyorozu and grinning. He knew Momo had a sharp eye, so he was sure she would notice something strange about the other girls. He approached Yaoyorozu from behind and put a hand on her shoulder, but the girl jumped and spun around, staring at him. Midoriya. Man. The villain attack must have really shaken her up, she yelled, blushing at her response to the boy. As Yaoyorozu gathered herself, he apologized, saying, "Sorry Yaoyorozu, I didn't mean to startle you." "No, I'm to blame for my overreaction. Did you need anything?" Looking at Midoriya's lips as they approached her, she asked, What is he doing? He wouldn't not are right here, right?" Izuku smiled at her as they moved closer, making Momo blush. "Have you noticed anything strange about the other girls in the class, Yaoyorozu?" After putting his hand on Momo's forehead and observing her flushed face, he said, "Wow, you're really red. Maybe you should go see the nurse." Momo nodded and felt her knees shake. "Well, I might do that, but to answer your question, I haven't noticed anything particularly unusual about the other girls." "What have you noticed?" she inquired as to what had prompted Izuku's sudden interest, and Izuku blushed as he took a step back. "I'm sorry to bother you, Yaoyorozu, but you should go to the nurse's office." Momo shook her head and he smiled awkwardly. "If you want me to, I'll take you." Izuku exhaled a sigh of relief as he turned around and felt Toru there. And no, that's quite alright, I can make it," she said as she walked off to the nurse's office. "Hey Toru, did you require anything?" As Toru held up her lunch, he inquired. "Would you like to join me for lunch?" Izuku grinned in appreciation for such a common request as she asked, fidgeting in her spot. He followed Toru to the cafeteria and said, "Sure, let's go." However, as soon as he and the invisible girl sat down, the majority of the class crowded in. "I never had a chance to tell you how amazing you were at the USJ, Midoriya. Your quirk is really showy, bro. Bakugo and I could even see you coming down like a freaking meteor from the ruin zone we were in. I didn't know you could make fire. I assumed your quirk only made your body better." Izuku laughed and rubbed his arm as Kirishima said, "That's up there with Todoroki having 2 quirks." It was fortunate that no one had witnessed any of his attacks up close because otherwise he would have had to explain how he stretched. "Oh, thank you, Kirishima. Any of us would have done it. Actually, I didn't invent fire thought. Heat is nothing more than friction and rapidly vibrating M molecules, so I basically just threw a lot of my stored energy into my fist, and it kind of exploded," he said before Sue interrupted. Sue's cheeks were flushed light pink as she said, "It was pretty reckless of you to go fight that thing, but if you hadn't I'm sure those villains would have done a lot worse before All Might could get there, so many thanks. At his immediate right, Ochako looked down into her tray of food as she blushed and said, well, we couldn't really see anything from where we were at the entrance, but we all know you gave it your all, so thank you Izuku. Jiro put his elbow out to Kaminari, who rolled his eyes, and said, totally, if you hadn't distracted that villain I wouldn't have been able to save this idiot from getting his brain fried even more than it already is. Kaminari crossed his arms and said, I was only fried trying to save you girls. You could be a little more grateful Jiro. Izuku grinned at his classmates. Considering his past, he never imagined that he would have people who truly liked and respected him, but now that he was class rep, his classmates surrounded him with eagerness. Life must have been full of unexpected turns, he thought. Then he felt something on his leg, so he moved it a little, assuming it was just an itch or his pant leg, but it returned, so he reached down to scratch it and grabbed hold of a foot. Izuku snatched his hand back violently, drawing attention from everyone at the table. Is there a problem with Midoriya? Iida asked, glancing at him from Ochako's right side. Oh, nothing, just a little shock is all, Izuku said, shaking his head quickly. Static electricity, The closest girls to him on that side were Mina and Jiro, so it had to be one of them. He looked at Jiro, who had been eating a chicken salad, before their eyes locked, and they stayed connected for a moment before Jiro looked away, blushing heavily. Could it really be Jiro? He asked himself, shaking his fist in a fake frustration as he looked across the table to see who was across from him. He doubted it was any of the guys on the other end, or at least hoped it wasn't one of them, so that left who? Is there something on my face, Midori? What's wrong? She asked, her gaze never leaving his. He looked back at his Katsuden and said, and no, it's nothing Ashido, sorry. The rest of the day proceeded pretty much as planned, with Izuku finding no clue who had given him those underwear. He was mentally exhausted from going through scenario after scenario, and as he packed up for the day and headed out to the address he had been given, he texted his mother to tell her that he would be studying with some friends. It was sickening to lie to his mother, but the truth would probably kill him from the embarrassment. Izuku stood outside a home that was completely normal, a chain-link fence, a mowed lawn, and even a welcome mat. The only unusual thing was that the mailbox's nameplate was missing. As he took a deep breath, he opened the gate, walked up to the front door, and knocked. This isn't suspicious, he said, cocking an eyebrow as he slowly made his way inside, and as he latched the door slowly and dropped his shoes and bag at the front as he moved deeper into the house, Izuku heard a muffled voice and a thud from one of the back rooms. He crept closer to the room, and as he looked into the doorway, a light was turned on, and there sat Ashido in a scruffy bathrobe, half of which was slipping off her shoulder to reveal her black and purple bra. She opened her legs slowly and said, I thought wearing the matching bra would be best. Izuku saw enough of her before he closed his eyes to know she had nothing on underneath. What are you doing, Ashido? He felt Mina's hands on his arms as she dragged him into her room and onto the bed, where she sat on top of him, and Izuku yelled as he heard her giggle. I knew that if I did that, you would close your eyes. With his eyes closed, he felt as though Ashido's voice was inside his brain, and the heat from her cunt on his stomach was searing. To answer your question, I'm giving everybody what they want, she whispered, digging her nails into his shoulders. If not, I'd have had no chance of getting the upper hand. What do you mean by everyone's desire? Ashido's face was inches from his own, and he could see his reflection in her black and gold eyes just as clearly as he was certain she could see herself in his. He asked, opening his eyes slightly. You're so adorable and innocent, Izuku. She smiled at him and said, I know you've been double-dipping, you naughty boy. Uraraka and Toru are both in love with you, but I assume you feel like you have to pick between them. Ashido sat up, cupped her mouth, and hunched over slightly, giving a positive impression of Izuku. On the one hand, I've known Toru for a lot longer, and she's so sweet I can't let her down, she said. However, Uraraka is very trustworthy and grounded, and she also knows something about me that I haven't shared with anyone else. That's what it is, right? Mina asked, and Izuku nodded in astonishment. For the most part, her assessment was accurate. What if I told you that you didn't have to choose, that if you really want them, you can have them both and more? Mina laughed as she lay on his chest, her breasts smooshing against him. He was certain he could see her cleavage if he looked down. Izuku's eyes widened at Mina's statement. I'd even be willing to help you if you give me what I want. Mina couldn't possibly do what she was saying. That kind of thing only occurs in hentai manga and anime. I'm telling the truth, Izuku, I'm a girl, so I know how girls' hearts work. I can do it if you do something for me. Ashido remained where she was, staring down at Izuku. Noticing the skepticism in her eyes, and sat back up a little, the top of the robe falling off down her arms, completely exposing her bra and top half. Before inhaling deeply, he licked his lips and dabbed at the slight smudge of perspiration on his forehead. "What do you want?" As Mina's smile turned predatory and her eyes appeared to glow in the evening light, he asked. Two girls were sitting in a booth in the back of a cafe, facing each other, and there was a noticeable tension between them. Ochako Uraraka and Toru Hagakuri were sitting on opposite sides of the booth, their drinks unopened as they gazed at each other. Despite the fact that one of them was invisible, it was clear to everyone that the two were engaged in a power struggle. Ochako reached for her orange cream soda and took a sip from the long straw before saying, "We both know why we're here, so let's not procrastinate any longer. Izuku is the subject of this." Toru grabbed her strawberry slush and swirled it around in the icy concoction before taking a sip herself. "We both want Izuku, but only one of us can have him, as you say, Uraraka." Toru sat forward and said, "I'm not backing down. I've been in love with Izuku since before school started." Ochako followed suit. Toru sat back and slapped her hand on the table while staring at Ochako. "You may have known him longer, but I asked him out first, and I was his first kiss, so isn't it just courtesy that you step aside? Otherwise you'll just be chasing your own selfish satisfaction, not caring for Izuku's happiness. You're claiming that I am the deceitful mistress? I'll do whatever it takes to make Izuku happy, and I know that it's me who will do that for him," she growled as Ochako sat there drinking. "If that's how you feel, let's settle things at the sports festival then," Ochako said, setting down her drink before sitting forward. Her ferocious aura from the sports festival announcement was back and even more menacing. Izuku is aiming for the top and needs someone by his side who can reach those same heights, so let's say whoever gets the closest or beats Izuku in the sports festival gets to be his girlfriend. I intend to win it all, but let's just say whoever makes it the farthest. Ochako extended her hand to Toru, who briefly accepted the offer. After explaining her prediction about what Toru and Uraraka were likely to do, Mina sat next to Izuku and said, "Yeah, it'll probably go something like that." The green-haired boy held his head in his hands and shook it back and forth. "I can't allow that to occur." He was about to get up when Mina threw both of her legs across his lap, saying, "I have to stop them." She said, sounding out his name, "And you will, by doing what I say, but first you ask what I want, and that is simple, my dear Izuku." Izuku's eyes almost exploded when he saw Mina Ishido in front of him. "I'll be your first baby, and be the first of your girlfriends, of which I have no doubt there will be a few, but I'll be your number one." She sat on Izuku's lap, holding his face in both hands, and said, "Come on Izuku, pop my cherry." She then kissed him, and the two fell back on the bed. Izuku's eyes widened. You'd think that after kissing Ochako twice and Toru once, he would be accustomed to this, but Mina was something else entirely. Although he had felt that he was on an equal footing with both Toru and Ochako, Mina's skill was so great that he could only marvel at it. Her lips pressed against his, then she bit his lip, causing him to gasp and giving her the ideal opportunity to stick her tongue inside his mouth, invading the orifice like a conquering army, glossing over his teeth. Izuku lay there panting as Mina drew back their mixed saliva, tracing down Izuku's mouth while Mina sat up wiping her own mouth. "What have we got here, oh my?" As she reached behind her to cup the noticeable bulge in Izuku's pants, Mina grinned and said, "Huh, I knew you were packing," she said, turning to face Izuku, who was quickly undoing his belt and pants with his crotch. Mina grabbed his pants and the waistband of his boxers, slid them both down, and then felt a blow to her nose as she stared at Izuku's amazing length. It was so hot and hard that she could feel the pounding of Izuku's heart through it, mirroring her own ecstatic rhythm. "Here I go." Mina spoke, her breath puffing against Izuku's cock before she engulfed it fully. Izuku had just managed to get his head back in focus in time to stare down Mina's dripping cunt. Her pink lips were puffy with arousal, giving the boy a peek at her darker pink folds. The weird feeling around his cock made Izuku jump, pushing more of it into Mina's mouth. "I didn't expect him to be so forceful," Izuku said. Izuku had his eyes closed, enjoying the sensation of Mina's fellatio, but he remembered that this was a two-person activity, so he opened them to see Mina's pussy again, a determined glint in his emerald spheres. Izuku thought as she tried her best to accommodate the large amount of man-meat in her mouth, slowly inching her head down before drawing back her tongue, making revolutions around his cock as she did so. Izuku was no cunnilingus master, but damn was he close. Mina jumped when he put his hands on her bare bottom, his rough palms sinking into her cheeks as his fingers gripped her tightly, and then she felt it, the rough texture of Izuku's tongue on her slit, almost enough to make her climax as she froze up. Mina pulled off Izuku's dick, panting as she felt him continue to lick her pussy. "Don't tell me you You've done this before? Mina froze, her whole body stiffening as she had her first orgasm, and she whined, shaking her hips from side to side as Izuku's tongue dug deep into her core. Izuku swallowed quickly to keep up with the flood of girl sperm in his mouth, and Izuku licked his lips, tasting the last of Mina's fluids, then gripped a leg in each hand and eased them open. Mina tasted, perhaps strange, like lime strawberries, and it was new, of course, because she collapsed on top of him. He moved her onto her back next to him, then on top of her, looking into her glazed golden eyes, her cheeks nearly purple with her blush as she lay there panting, her breasts heaving with every breath. Mina's eyes followed up Izuku's member as he pressed it to her entrance, and then she locked eyes with her green-haired lover, who gave her an awkward smile that was probably an attempt at an intimate grin. Even in this situation, you're still so pure, I love it. She thought to herself as she plucked a condom out of the nightstand drawer and tore off the top as she sat up, feeling her second wind coming on. Here, let me, baby. She whispered as she slid the condom down his length, biting her lip as she watched it. Damn, it's barely big enough, she thought, a silly smile, before she felt Izuku's arms wrap around her, drawing her forward into an embrace as his dick pierced her core, impaling her on his pleasure rod. Izuku could feel Mina's breasts against his chest, her heart pounding against his, as he moved to lay her back on the bed and withdrew from her, noticing tiny red droplets on her bed. Mina groaned loudly in his ear as she wrapped her arms and legs around him, squeezing him tightly and forcing all of Izuku into her. Before sensing Mina's hand on his cheek, he spoke in a worried tone. She whispered to him, "Shush, it's fine, it doesn't hurt at all, I promise. Now show me what you've got, stud." Izuku nodded, sliding his hands down her sides to her ample hips, grabbing hold as he began thrusting into her slowly at first, easing his full length in before withdrawing only to repeat the process, his rhythm picking up until the moaning of Mina and the sounds of flesh colliding filled the room. "Oh Izuku." As the boy's cock pounded her cock like a drum, Mina screamed as he grabbed her breasts and sucked on one of her nipples. They lay in Mina's bed, both of them drenched in sweat as Mina's fluids ran out onto her comforter. Izuku lay there for a moment listening to Mina's heartbeat as his head lay between her breasts before finally moving. His soft cock withdrew from Mina's pussy, and the bulbous tip of the condom filled with Izuku's seed popped free of Mina, giving her one last jolt of pleasure. Mina grabbed hold of Izuku's back, feeling the strong corded muscle there as she dug her nails into his back, hearing Izuku's hiss of pain as he drove his dick into her very center before crying out in her ear. As Mina sat up and stroked his back with her foot, Izuku sat on the edge of her bed to catch his breath. "Are you certain this will work, Mina?" Mina gave a gentle smile as he said, "I don't want to hurt you girls." "Izuku, I'll make sure that doesn't occur. I promise to make sure that everyone is happy. The question now is, are you interested in sleeping here?" Lying against Izuku's back, she said, "I don't mind going for round 2 or 4. My parents won't be home until tomorrow afternoon, so the house is ours." She bit his earlobe and whispered into his ear, but Izuku quickly shook his head. He reached for his clothes and said, "And not that I don't want to do that again, but I should go home, my mama gets worried." Mina flopped back onto her bed, pouting and puffing her cheeks. Imagine a hit and rue. Even though Izuku's kiss wasn't particularly extravagant, it still took Mina by surprise and silenced her while he dressed. Mina touched her lips and then giggling as she lay there, and he said, blushing brightly, "I want to do this again once everything is settled." She wrapped herself in her blanket and whispered, "Oh Izuku, just when I think I've got you, you go and show me something new." She could smell Izuku's scent. As she walked to her shoe locker that Friday, Ochako sighed and thought, Izuku was being really distant today. She recalled how Izuku seemed to avoid her, and she wondered if he had learned about the altercation between Toru and me and was disappointed in me. In her shoe locker, she discovered a note that read, "Meet me at the park on the far side of the lake after school, and I'll give you my answer." Ochako's heart raced as she read the note, which was unmistakably written by Izuku. So that's why he was being so aloof today, she thought as she changed her shoes and left right away for the park. Ochako considered going home to change, but she didn't want to keep Izuku waiting, especially if it was good news, so she couldn't afford to put it off. After arriving at the park, she took a look around before going to the other side of the lake, expecting to see Izuku there, but instead she saw Mina. "Mina, what are you doing here?" As the girl with the pink skin turned around with a piece of paper in her hand, Ochako asked. As Ochako started to pale, Mina explained, "Oh hey Ochako, I got a note in my locker asking me to come here, and well I found this here, but it said I should wait until all 6 of us are here." "All 6 of us?" "No, Izuku wouldn't do that. There must be something else going on. Maybe it's a prank? She inquired, assuming that Izuku, her ex-boyfriend, had invited more girls to this. As she stood there chasing her own thoughts, she thought, but she was positive that her note was written by Izuku because she recognized his handwriting. Then, she heard another pair of footsteps, and Jiro entered, panting as she knelt down to catch her breath. She opened her eyes to the two girls and arched a brow, saying, "I'm here, sorry for being late." "Okay, what the hell, I thought I was supposed to be meeting someone else." She blushed and turned her head away. With a sly smile, Mina said, "That makes three of us, we're halfway there." As more footsteps approached, Toru, Momo, and Asui, who was surprisingly shy, came into view. The two girls gave her a suspicious look. "Yay, we're all here now, I can get started. So first off, I lied, there's nothing on this paper." Mina then flipped the page to show the girls that both sides were blank before putting it in her pocket. While the girls around her wore varying degrees of embarrassment at being discovered, Mina said, "Also, Midoriya isn't here either, he wrote the notes, but only because I asked him to, and since you all showed up as quickly as you did, guess that means you're all super interested in the guy." "Oh, don't be shy, girls, I totally see why you want him, but before we get to him we need to settle some things between us." Mina said this as the sun started to set, darkening her face until only her golden eyes and Cheshire grin were visible.
I will continue the story in next part. Till then, bye bye.